You stand at the quiet edge of a dusty frontier town, the kind that looks like it was built by a handful of hopefuls, a few lost souls, and one overly optimistic carpenter who believed every building absolutely needed a creaking porch. The air is warm, a little scratchy in your throat, and it smells faintly of wood smoke, tired horses, and bread someone definitely burned this morning. You shift your weight on the packed dirt road, feeling the grit slide beneath your boots. Boots you're borrowing from this world, because the ones you wear in real life would have given up before sunrise. This is the American West in the late 1800s, though it isn't the cinematic version with dramatic showdowns and soundtrack-ready whistling. This is the slower, sleepier truth beneath the myth, where everything takes longer, everything is quieter, and everything is just a little more inconvenient, like life running at 0.75 speed. And sure, you want to be brave, but you probably won't make it through this day. That's okay. Most people back then barely made it through their week. As you walk, the sun begins easing itself over the horizon, touching the edges of the mountains with a soft gold that looks almost painted on. Your breath moves with the cool morning air as the town wakes up around you, doors opening, footsteps thudding on wooden planks. The soft grunt of a man hauling a crate he definitely regrets volunteering to carry. A couple of chickens scurry across the road like tiny feathered bandits, refusing to respect authority. Somewhere, a dog gives a sleepy bark, as if reminding everyone he's technically on duty. You hear the faint jingling of metal spurs behind you, an iconic sound that, in reality, is mostly just someone's way of announcing they exist. The man wearing them nods at you in that slow, Old West manner where a nod covers about 7 different social functions at once. Hello, good morning, nice boots, I'm tired, please don't start trouble, I don't want to talk. But also, I'm being polite. A major historical fact slips into your awareness. By the 1882, more than half the towns like this one across the West were temporary settlements. Boom towns that appeared when opportunity sparked and disappeared once it burned out. The place you're standing in might not even last the year. That probably explains the carpenter's questionable enthusiasm. You keep moving, passing the dry goods store where a sun-faded sign advertises everything from flour to tin cups to miracle tonics, which, if we're being honest, are mostly alcohol wearing a fancy moustache. One obscure little detail from this era: some shopkeepers hung strings of onions outside their doors, believing the smell warded off bad spirits and sickness. Whether it worked is still unclear, though historians still debate whether people honestly believed in it or whether they just really liked onions. A soft breeze pushes across the street, lifting faint spirals of dust. A woman in a wide, faded dress sweeps her porch, pausing occasionally to stare at you, in that way people in small towns do. Curious, cautious, and running a mental, "Are you trouble?" checklist. You smile gently. She nods back. You're practically a local now. Above you, a lazy wooden sign creaks back and forth the town's saloon. Every sound in this world feels a bit softer than you expected, as if the West itself is trying not to wake the light sleepers. Inside, you hear the muffled clatter of glasses, the scrape of a chair, the sigh of a bartender who's been awake too long. You get the feeling that if you stepped inside, the whole room would turn to look at you, partly because you're new, and partly because staring at the door is this town's #1 pastime. That, and complaining about the weather. Your feet carry you farther down the street until you reach a narrow alley tucked between 2 mismatched buildings. The ground here is hard-packed and cool, shaded from the sun. Earlier, you passed this same spot, but now you notice something you missed before. A small wooden water barrel filled with frogs. Yes, frogs. Someone believes they keep mosquitoes away. Does it work? Historians still argue about that with surprising passion. One theory suggests it was more about entertainment than science. After all, life could get a little boring out here. You continue on, feeling the warmth grow as the sun settles into the day's rhythm. The world around you is steady, unhurried, and lightly sarcastic in its existence, like it knows the stories people tell about it and politely disagrees. You pause as a wagon rattles past, driven by a man in a sweat-stained hat who nods without looking up. The wheels kick up clouds of dust that drift toward you in a slow, sleepy swirl. Another subtle reminder that the Old West is less fast-paced adventure, and more, you're going to need to wash your face a lot. At the far end of town, A windmill creaks. With every rotation. Someone once said it sounded like the universe clearing its throat. And you can kind of hear it. The wooden blades turn lazily, pumping water up from the earth for whoever needs it. Out here, water is the closest thing you'll get to treasure. You take a moment to breathe, not just because you need to adjust to the altitude, but because this is a good place to pause and settle into the story. And while we're settling, here's the softest reminder ever. If you're enjoying this slow drift through time, feel free to like the video, subscribe to support more of these gentle historical wanderings, and comment where you're watching from, along with your local time. It's always fun to see where our sleepy little community is tuning in from. Somehow the Old West feels cozier when you're sharing it with people scattered across the modern world. Now, let your shoulders drop a little. Let your breath soften. The day in this dusty town is just beginning, and there are 22 long, wandering sections still ahead. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You step deeper into the waking town, following the slow pulse of morning activity. The sun lifts itself a little higher, edging across the wooden rooftops like a polite houseguest testing whether it's allowed inside. The warmth begins to soak into your sleeves, into the dust, into the boards beneath your feet. This world isn't in a hurry, and neither are you. That's the unexpected charm of the Old West. Everything takes time, and you're just along for the ride. You find yourself drifting toward the livery stable, drawn by the earthy smell of hay, horses, and that unique aroma of someone left the door open during last night's dust storm. Inside, a stable hand sweeps the floor with the enthusiasm of someone who knows he'll be sweeping again in 15 minutes. He nods at you, the same all-purpose greeting that basically means, "Yep, still alive." A horse whinnies, softly, flicking its ears toward you. Horses here aren't just transportation, they're co-workers, confidants, and occasionally the only thing in town with a better work ethic than the sheriff. You run your hand along a stall door, feeling the grooves cut by decades of use. There's a comfort to it, like touching the spine of an old book that still remembers who last read it. A major historical fact drifts in as you watch the stable hand brush a chestnut mare. In the 19th century West, owning a good horse could cost the equivalent of several months' wages, making it more valuable than most personal belongings, even more than some houses. If you lost your horse, you didn't just lose transportation, you lost independence. In some towns, it bordered on losing your entire identity. Outside, a sharp clank echoes from the blacksmith's workshop. You wander toward the sound, stepping into the warm cloud of smoke and metal that always surrounds places where things get hammered into. Usefulness. The blacksmith, broad-shouldered, soot-stained, and radiating the energy of someone who absolutely lifts heavy things before breakfast, glances up briefly before returning to his anvil. Sparks scatter like tiny golden insects, rising and fading in the air. He works on a horseshoe, tapping it into shape with slow, rhythmic strikes. Each strike is steady, timed, almost meditative. If someone sold this as a sleep soundtrack today, 12 hours of relaxing blacksmith ambience, you'd probably fall asleep within minutes. You notice an odd little item on a shelf. A tiny horseshoe nailed to a chunk of wood but upside down. When you ask about it, the blacksmith snorts and says something about keeping bad luck from sliding into the shop. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the morning. In some Western towns, people hung horseshoes upside down to pour luck down onto anyone walking beneath. Others insisted that doing so let all the luck spill out. Historians still debate whether this was superstition, tradition, or just something people argued about because they were bored. You step back outside, blinking in the sunlight. Across the way, a woman pumps water from the communal well, the wooden handle squeaking with each push. Her sleeves are rolled up, her brow already glistening, because frontier life does not care about your desire to stay clean. A young boy beside her sloshes water from a bucket, managing to spill more on himself than into the barrel he's supposed to fill. A cart rattles by, pulled by two mules, who give you the side eye that only mules can deliver a perfect blend of judgment and resignation. You watch them pass, admiring their patience. Then again, patience is pretty much the only option when your day involves dragging wood through dusty streets while wearing your own body weight in fur. You head toward the general store, where a pair of men lean against the wall, discussing something in that slow way people use when they're trying to make a 3-minute conversation last an entire morning. As you pass, you catch a snippet. Something about needing oxen for a cattle drive, something about who borrowed whose shovel, and something about a mysterious pie that vanished from someone's windowsill yesterday. You make a mental note never to leave cooling baked goods unattended. Inside the store, the atmosphere is dim, quiet, and pleasantly cluttered. Shelves overflow with sacks of flour, coils of rope, jars of preserves, nails, buttons, and the occasional item the shopkeeper can't identify anymore, but refuses to throw away. A bell tinkles overhead as you enter a cheery sound that feels almost out of place in a town built mostly from grunts and nods. The shopkeeper greets you warmly, launching into a friendly explanation of what he has in stock today. You nod along as he proudly gestures to a stack of tin cups, a crate of molasses, and a dangerously leaning tower of soaps. You pick one up, lavender, scented. You never expected the Old West to smell like a relaxing bath, but here you are. While he talks, you notice a jar behind the counter, filled with what looks like dried beans. But on closer inspection, they're pebbles. He explains that kids in town collect colorful ones and trade them like currency, each color supposedly worth something different. He shrugs, adding, "Historians still debate whether children invented this economy or whether the adults just went along with it." You're starting to think the adults here might be tired. Very tired. You buy nothing but thank him anyway, because thanking shopkeepers is a universal sign of politeness across all eras. When you step back outside, the sun feels higher, brighter, and a little more insistent. Morning chores are settling into mid-morning rhythms. People are moving with purpose now, collecting water, feeding livestock, sweeping porches, mending fences, mending clothes, mending the fences they already mended. The world is a cycle of effort, patience, and dust. Mostly dust. You wander toward the edge of town again, where a fence line runs crookedly into open land. From here, you can see the rolling plains stretch toward the horizon, vast, golden, and humming quietly in the sun. A hawk circles overhead, its wings steady as it rides the warm air. You breathe in, the moment is calm. Almost too calm. Then you hear a distant shout from behind you, someone discovering that the frogs in the water barrel have migrated to a bucket left outside. The Old West is full of surprises, and none of them care about your sense of dignity. Still, the day is young, and you're still standing. That's something. You walk back toward the heart of town as the sun climbs higher, settling into its role as the ultimate frontier supervisor, overseeing everything, judging everyone, and showing no mercy to anybody who forgot their hat. The heat nudges your shoulders, gently at first, then insistently, like a cat, asking for food, but with significantly worse manners. People begin to move more slowly now, conserving their energy the way frontier folks always did. Out here, unnecessary motion is basically an amateur sport no one recommends. You pass a man who's leaned so far into the shade of a building that he's practically part of the architecture. He tilts his hat to you, a gesture that might mean hello, or might simply be him adjusting the only patch of shade left on his face. A major historical fact strolls into your awareness as calmly as the cattle wandering down the road. Temperatures across much of the 19th century West regularly soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 degrees Celsius, and heat stroke was a surprisingly common cause of death among settlers, cowboys, and travelers. People thought rattlesnakes and gunfights were the big threats. Really, it was dehydration sneaking up like an assassin with very dry hands. You wander toward a water trough where two horses drink lazily. A man fills a tin cup from the nearby pump, takes a sip, and sighs the way only someone who has been dusty since sunrise can sigh. Water is the currency of survival here. Conversation at watering spots doesn't just happen, it blossoms, as if the human brain becomes 20% more social the moment it's hydrated. He glances at your clothes, your posture, your shoes, everything. "Hot one today," he mutters. You nod. That's the local version of a philosophical discussion. Across the street, the saloon doors swing open, and someone steps out into the sunlight with the slow determination of a person who regrets all their life choices, including the one that brought them outside. You hear the faint clack of billiard balls inside, and the dull thump of boots on wooden floors. The saloon smells like spilled whiskey, stale air, and one bathroom that everyone pretends doesn't exist. Feeling curious, you step inside. The air is cooler here, dimmer, with sunlight slicing through shutters and settling on dust motes like tiny drifting lanterns. A piano sits in the corner out of tune, of course, but charmingly so, like someone with enthusiasm but no training. At one of the tables, two men play cards with the intensity of scholars decoding ancient tablets. This is your obscure cultural tidbit of the day. Many frontier card games weren't formal games at all, but improvised mixes of rules people remembered incorrectly from other people who also remembered incorrectly. Historians still debate which frontier games were genuine and which were just elaborate misunderstandings. One man glances up at you and nods with a seriousness that suggests the stakes are high. They're playing for dried beans. Not money, beans. Actual beans. You offer them an awkward thumbs up, unsure whether that's an acceptable gesture in the 1800s. Based on their expression, it is not. You back out slowly, bumping the swinging saloon doors on your way out like everyone else who isn't used to them. The bright sunlight hits you, again, instantly reminding you that the Old West is committed to its oven with scenic views aesthetic. You continue down the street until you reach a small group gathered around a wagon. A traveling merchant, his hat tilted at a jaunty yet suspiciously calculated angle, stands beside a display of cure-all tonics. He gives a booming speech about elixirs guaranteed to soothe your nerves, sharpen your mind, and definitely not contain questionable ingredients. You watch the crowd react with various levels of excitement and skepticism. The merchant catches your eye and offers you a sample in a tiny glass vial. You sniff it carefully. It smells like licorice mixed with danger. You politely decline. You've already survived dehydration and bean-based gambling. There's no need to risk mystery syrup. A gust of wind sweeps down the street, carrying dust and the faintest smell of frying food. Someone is cooking lunch. You follow the scent toward a small outdoor stand where a woman is stirring something in a cast-iron pot. The aroma is warm and savory, filling the air with the promise of a meal that will definitely burn your tongue if you rush it. She offers you a bowl. You accept, letting the steam rise up into your face. The taste is simple but comforting: beans, onions, herbs, and something you can't identify but hope isn't frog-related. She smiles when you compliment it. Family recipe, she says, goes back generations. Whether that's true or she made it up 5 minutes ago, historians still debate. You sit on a low wooden step to eat, watching the town shift into its midday lull. The chatter softens, footsteps slow. Even the animals seem to pause in the shade. The frontier is harsh, but it listens to nature's rhythms. You begin to feel the slower pulse of the day settling into your own breath. Your eyes drift to the horizon, where rolling hills shimmer in the heat. You spot a few riders in the distance, their silhouettes tiny against the golden landscape. Maybe ranch hands, maybe travelers, maybe people who lost track of where the town actually is. The West is big like that, big enough to misplace entire people without meaning to. You set your empty bowl aside and stand, feeling the weight of the sun again. The ground is warm beneath your boots, radiating the heat it gathered all morning. Even the breeze, faint as it is, feels like it's been reheated. Someone shouts from a porch, "Storm coming tonight." Another replies, "You said that yesterday." The first man shrugs. Predicting the weather here is basically a frontier pastime. You take a deep breath, letting the heat settle into your bones, letting the slow rhythm of the day wash over you. You're halfway through the morning, surprisingly still standing, surprisingly hydrated, and surprisingly entertained by bean gambling and upside-down horseshoes. You ease yourself back onto the dusty main road, letting the midday weight of the sun press gently against your hat, like a reminder that shade is a privilege, not a right. The town has shifted into its slowest mode of the day, the kind of moment where even the wind seems to decide it's too hot to bother. You take a few steps toward the outskirts, drawn by the wide-open land that stretches beyond the last crooked fence post. The road leading out is long, pale, and shimmering faintly under the heat, like someone polished it with 1,000 grains of sand. You walk toward it, feeling the familiar crunch under your boots, each step a soft drumbeat of dust and rhythm. The town grows quieter behind you, until the murmur of voices becomes a gentle hum, like distant bees or a half-forgotten memory. A major historical fact settles in beside you, as naturally as the dust settling on your sleeves. In the late 1800s, most frontier towns were connected by long, often dangerous roads that stretched across miles of unsettled or disputed land, and travelers could spend entire days without seeing another soul. The West was vast, so vast that even loneliness had room to breathe. You walk far enough that the town becomes small behind you, its buildings hugging together like they're afraid of the openness. Ahead, the landscape ripples with heat. Grasses sway in slow-motion waves, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote lets out a casual yip, probably announcing lunch plans. A fence line runs along part of the road, its posts weathered into soft curves from decades of sun and wind. A few boards lean at odd angles, like they're trying their best but have accepted they can't meet everyone's expectations. As you pass one, you spot something unusual dangling from a loop of twine. A dried-out corn cob, tied securely as though someone believed it served a purpose. And it did. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some ranchers hung corn cobs along the fence as makeshift weather charms, believing they could predict rain based on how soft or hard the cob became. Historians still debate whether this was meteorology, superstition, or a particularly bored rancher trying to feel productive. The ground slopes gently downward into a shallow ravine. You follow the road as it curves, the sun momentarily ducking behind a cloud, an unexpected act of kindness. The breeze picks up slightly, brushing against your neck, carrying with it the faint smell of sage and warm soil. A wooden wagon stands abandoned near the trail, one wheel broken, leaning in a way that suggests it gave up halfway through being fixed. You approach it, running your hand along the rough wood. The splintered edges tell a story. Maybe someone pushed it too hard, or maybe the Old West simply collected broken things the way modern people collect unused apps. Beside the wagon, you spot a cluster of tiny, sun-bleached bones. Not human, likely a jackrabbit that met an unfortunate end through natural causes. Still, the sight reminds you that this land doesn't apologize for being tough. It just is. As you walk farther, a rider appears in the distance, moving slowly along the road toward you. The figure stays small for a long time, long enough that you begin to wonder whether you're drifting into some cowboy mirage. Eventually, the horse and rider take shape. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat, sitting tall in the saddle, reins held loosely but confidently. She slows as she approaches, offering a polite nod that says, "I see you. I'm acknowledging you. Now let's both pretend we're not out here avoiding conversation." You return the nod, mastering the subtle language of frontier greetings. "Hot day," she says. You agree. At this point, remarking on the weather might as well be the official language of the West. She tips her hat and continues down the road, her silhouette growing smaller with each step her horse takes. For a moment, you watch the dust rise behind her, curling into the warm air like a fading trail of smoke. You resume your walk until you reach a small rise, overlooking a broad stretch of prairie. The view opens like a slow yawn, endless grass, stunted shrubs, a few scattered cottonwoods gripping the earth beside a thin stream. You hear insects buzzing, the occasional chirp of a bird, and the soft whisper of the breeze. It's peaceful out here, quiet enough that your thoughts start moving slower, settling into the same lazy pace as the land around you. The West has a way of untangling the noise you didn't know you were carrying. A cluster of dark clouds hangs low on the horizon, maybe the storm the man predicted earlier, or maybe just passing shadows pretending to be dramatic. Historians still debate whether frontier people were genuinely skilled at weather prediction or simply very confident guessers. You take a sip of water from your canteen, feeling the coolness spread through you like a reward. Staying hydrated in this world is less a task and more a survival hobby. You glance back toward the town, now a small smudge against the veer, sunlight, and feel a faint tug drawing you back. As much as the open road offers peace, towns offered safety, or at least the illusion of it. You decide to turn around, making your way back up the slope. The breeze changes direction, carrying the distant clatter of townsfolk and the far-off cornet of someone trying, unsuccessfully, to practice music in the afternoon heat. The road feels different on the walk back, the way paths always do when you know what waits at the other end. Your boots crunch softly. The dust rises in gentle spirals. A grasshopper leaps across your path, as if reminding you not to walk too quickly. You listen. You slow. By the time you near the first buildings again, the afternoon has begun to settle warm, calm, and humming with quiet chores and slow conversations. The town hasn't changed much in your short absence, but something about it feels more familiar now, like a place you can walk through without getting lost, most of the time. When you're ready, say, continue, and we'll ease into section 5, where the afternoon brings new challenges and new sleepy surprises. You step back into town just as the afternoon light begins to shift. Still hot, still bright, but softening at the edges, like a candle flame settling onto its wick. Everything feels slower now, as though the whole town has collectively decided that anything requiring effort can wait until the temperature drops at least 5 degrees. Even the horses have those half-lidded afternoon eyes, the ones that say, "If you need me to run, please reconsider." You walk the familiar path past the saloon, the general store, and the creaking water trough where a chicken now perches like it owns the place. Someone shooed it away earlier, but chickens, much like persistent ideas, always return. Dust swirls lazily around your boots as you move down the road, absorbing the rhythm of the town's sleepy hum. A pair of older men sit on a bench outside the barber shop, whittling scraps of wood into shapes you can't quite identify. Possibly whistles, possibly animals, possibly nothing at all. They give you the kind of nod that frontier elders reserve for travelers they've silently decided are not hopeless. A compliment, technically. One of them gestures to the seat beside him. You sit, feeling the rough wood beneath you. The man closest to you leans in, lowering his voice, like he's about to reveal a state secret. "Town's been buzzing about a new rumor," he says. "Stranger came through last night. Said he saw something out near the creek." You wait. He pauses dramatically. You suspect the pause is 80% for effect, 20% because he forgot what he was saying. "A ghost horse," he finally whispers, "white as snow, glowing in the dark." You blink slowly. "That's certainly a rumor. Here's your major historical fact. Ghost stories were incredibly common in frontier towns, often spreading through isolated communities where fear, boredom, and imagination blended into folklore. Many settlers believed the spirits of lost travelers or animals lingered along trails or near water sources. You nod politely, because that's what you do when an elder tells you their favorite spooky story. The second man clears his throat. Historians still debate whether these stories came from genuine sightings or from people mixing exhaustion with questionable frontier coffee. He taps his carving knife against the wood for emphasis. "But we believe it," he says, despite his friend giving him a skeptical side-eye. Before you can respond, a young girl comes rushing out of the mercantile, hair wild from the wind, clutching a scrap of paper. "Ma," says, "the mail riders passed the ridge," she shouts triumphantly before sprinting down the street, trailing dust behind her like a comet. Suddenly, several townsfolk perk up, people emerge from doorways, lean from porches, squint down the road with renewed purpose. Mail day is the closest thing most towns get to excitement. Letters meant news, connections, reminders that the world beyond these dusty streets still existed. A horse eventually appears in the distance, carrying a rider hunched slightly from the weight of long miles. His saddlebags bulge with parcels and envelopes, and his face is lined with that particular brand of exhaustion reserved for people who ride hundreds of miles with only dust and coyotes for company. He stops in the center of town, greeting folks by name as they gather around him. You watch the scene unfold, eagerness, nerves, curiosity, all wrapped into a small crowd of hopeful faces. The rider begins sorting through the letters, calling out names, handing over carefully folded envelopes, sealed with wax or pins, or, occasionally, string, because someone ran out of everything else. One man celebrates receiving a letter from his brother out east. A woman clutches a parcel of fabric, holding it like treasure. Another person mutters something about still not hearing back from a cousin who owes them money. You wander closer and catch sight of a peculiar envelope, addressed to no one, just to whoever finds this. The mail rider shrugs. "Came through last week. No idea who wrote it." You resist the urge to ask for more details. Mysterious letters rarely end well in frontier stories, especially for the person who opens them. Instead, you drift toward the small lunch stand from earlier. The pot still simmers, and this time the smell is even richer, meaty, herby, and maybe with a hint of chili. The woman running the stand gives you a knowing smile. "Told you you'd be back." She hands you another bowl, and you savor a bite as the warmth settles comfortably in your chest. Across the street, a group of boys race back and forth, swinging sticks like imaginary swords. One of them stops to declare himself sheriff, before immediately tripping over a bucket. Just beyond them, you notice a tiny object hanging from a windowsill, a lump of something pale wrapped in cloth. Curious, you tilt your head to get a better look. The stand woman chuckles. "Oh, that? Soap charm." She explains your obscure tidbit. Some households in the Old West hung scraps of homemade soap near doors or windows to ward off sickness, believing the scent purified the air. Historians still debate whether this worked or just made houses smell vaguely of lye and lavender. You continue eating as a light breeze brushes past, bringing with it hints of the approaching evening. The sky begins to shift, still bright, but tinged with that soft golden glow that signals the long, gentle unwinding of the day. In the distance, you hear the faint rumble of thunder, or maybe a wagon hitting a rock. Hard to tell in the West. Frontiersmen would often prepare for a storm only to discover someone's cart had a squeaky axle. The barber steps outside his shop and stretches, squinting at the sky. "Storm or no storm," he mutters. "Gonna be a long night." You take another slow bite. You're starting to get the sense that almost every night here is long, and that surviving a single day in the Old West is less about heroics and more about pacing, like a marathon you didn't sign up for, but must finish, because there's no Uber to take you home. Across the street, the two older men still sit on the bench, one holding his half-finished wood carving, the other still insisting the ghost horse is real. The woman at the food stand gives a snort of amusement. Folks here love a good story, helps pass the heat. And as the afternoon sun slides lower, as the town begins its slow drift toward evening chores and the promise of cooler air, you can feel the story of this place continuing to unfold around you. Dusty, tired, stubborn, oddly charming. And somehow, you're still here. You feel the first shift of the evening wind as it brushes lightly across your face, cooler than anything you've felt all day. Carrying that signature, Old West blend of dust, sage, and a hint of something is cooking somewhere. And I hope it's good. The sky begins its slow descent into amber, then honey, then that soft peach tone that makes even the stubbornest wooden buildings look almost gentle. People start emerging from the shadows of their porches, stretching their backs, rubbing their shoulders, and muttering the universal phrase of the frontier. Well, guess I better get those chores done before dark. Out here, sunset is less a time of rest and more a deadline. You stand in the middle of the dusty road, feeling the collective sigh ripple across the town. A dog trots past you, tongue lolling, completely ignoring whatever job it's supposed to be doing. You follow its path with your eyes until it reaches a water bowl outside the general store. Laps noisily, then flops down with an expression that says, "Chores are overrated." A major historical fact slips into your awareness as naturally as the sinking light. In many frontier towns, evenings were the busiest part of the day because temperatures finally allowed people to work without collapsing. Chores like repairing wagons, gathering firewood, tending animals, and hauling water often happened after sunset. Daytime was for survival, evening was for productivity. You wander toward the edge of town, where a man is wrestling a loose shutter back into place on his small cabin. He gives you a nod, the frontier version of, "I'm fine, but also please send help." The shutter bangs again, startling a chicken that was innocently pecking nearby. The chicken squawks indignantly, as if suing for emotional damages, then waddles away. Just beyond him, a woman hangs wet laundry on a line, clothespins clicking softly into place. She hums a tune that sounds half lullaby, half prayer for the wind not to rip her linens into the next county. You pass her, offering a small smile. She returns it with the weary friendliness of someone who has accepted that laundry will never, ever end. The breeze picks up again, cooler now, almost refreshing. You take a slow breath, letting the scent of the land settle into your senses. Somewhere nearby, two boys argue about who's responsible for feeding the goats. One claims it's his brother's turn. The other insists he fed them last week, which you strongly suspect is a lie. You wander toward the corral, where several ranch hands are finishing their evening tasks. A man brushes down a dusty gelding, humming low under his breath. Another stacks hay in a rhythm that suggests he's been stacking hay since the beginning of time. You lean on the wooden fence, watching them work with a quiet steadiness that feels as old as the prairie itself. Then you notice something odd, a bundle of feathers tied above one of the gates. You squint at it. It looks like a bunch of bird wings strung together with twine. Before you can guess its purpose, one of the ranch hands notices your curious stare. Scare charm, he explains. Keeps coyotes out. Or so my granddaddy said. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some frontier families tied bundles of feathers or dried wings near animal pens to frighten predators or ward off bad luck. Historians still debate whether it actually worked, or whether it simply made hawks feel vaguely insulted. You thank the ranch hand and keep walking as the sun dips lower. The golden light stretches long shadows across the ground, making everything look slightly dramatic, even the outhouse. A few lamps flicker to life, their glow warm against the darkening sky. You pass the blacksmith's shop just as he steps outside, wiping soot from his arms with a rag that may once have been white but has since accepted its destiny. His forge glows behind him, casting orange light across the dirt like molten paint. He nods at you. Quiet night, he says. You glance at the sky. A faint rumble echoes somewhere beyond the hills, maybe thunder, maybe someone rolling a barrel over uneven boards. Frontier life keeps you guessing. The breeze grows stronger, whipping little, swirls of dust around your ankles. A woman hurries by, carrying an armful of firewood. She pauses when she sees you. Storm might roll in, she says. Or not. Hard to tell. She's right. In the Old West, predicting the weather was basically early lottery gambling. As you make your way back into the heart of town, lamps begin to glow in windows like tiny portals of warmth. Voices mingle slowly, low conversations about supper, trade, the odd rumor about that ghost horse again. The sky deepens to a muted blue, dotted with early stars that peek through like shy storytellers. You head toward the well to refill your canteen, joining a small line of townsfolk. A man behind you taps your shoulder and hands you a cup. New in town, right? He asks. You confirm with a nod. Well, he says with the seriousness of a prophet, just remember, never trust a man who says he can predict the weather by looking at a cactus. You almost laugh, but he doesn't. You hand the cup back respectfully. As you finish filling your canteen, you hear the soft clatter of a dinner bell from somewhere in town, a wooden one, carved with care and worn by years of use. The sound is warm, inviting, telling people that it's time to gather, eat, and share stories before the night fully settles in. Supper in the Old West isn't fancy, but it's comforting stews, breads, occasionally something fried if someone had extra oil that day. You follow the scent toward a small boarding house where a few travelers sit on the porch steps with tin plates in their lap. The air is filled with quiet conversation, the scrape of spoons, the occasional chuckle. You take a seat on the edge of the porch, feeling your body loosen as you watch the lamplit street sway with evening shadows. The day's heat slowly melts away, replaced by the promise of a cooler night ahead. As you breathe in the settling calm, you realize something. You've survived morning heat, bean gambling, frog barrels, and rumors of ghost horses. You're doing surprisingly well for someone who probably wouldn't last an hour without hydration reminders on their phone. The wind sighs through the town, gentle and steady. Night approaches. Night eases into town with the kind of patience only the Old West truly understands, slow, steady, and soft around the edges. The last glow of sunset melts into a deepening blue, and lanterns begin to flicker awake, one by one like sleepy fireflies, deciding it's time to get to work. You stand up from the porch, brushing dust from your clothes, and feel the first true coolness of the evening settle across your skin. It's a calm coolness, the kind that makes your shoulders drop an inch, your breath lengthen slightly, and your thoughts soften around the edges. The heat has finally loosened its grip. The sky above is a broad canvas of early stars, stretched out like a polished tablecloth someone forgot to iron. A small group begins gathering outside the saloon, not for drinking or gambling, but for talking, for the nightly exchange of rumors, nonsense, half-truths, and occasionally something resembling wisdom. You're drawn there by the gentle murmur of voices, the low laughter, and the warm glow of lantern light spilling across the dirt. A major historical fact drifts into the moment with perfect timing. In many frontier towns, evenings were the prime time for storytelling, and oral traditions were crucial for preserving local history, warnings, folklore, and entertainment in places where books and newspapers were scarce. Stories were both community glue and a way to stay awake long enough to finish evening chores. You join the edge of the group as an older man with a sweeping grey mustache adjusts himself on a crate. "All right," he says, clearing his throat dramatically. "Tonight's story is about what I saw last fall near Coyote Ridge." Immediately, 3 people groan. One mutters, "This again?" The man holds up a hand. "This version has updates." A collective sigh. Apparently, the Western frontier invented the concept of DLC. You settle in as he begins. He speaks slowly, shaping the night with his voice, describing how he was riding home when he heard strange noises, low moans, rustling wind, the sound of something large moving through brush. He talks about a shadowy figure, a glowing shape, and how his horse refused to go any farther. Half the crowd listens with wide eyes. The other half listens with the resigned patience of people who have heard a story enough times to quote it verbatim. Beside you, a woman leans close and whispers, he says, glowing shape. But last month it was a shadow beast, and the month before that it was a giant owl. Historians still debate whether he's telling one story or 12. You stifle a smile. A gust of wind scatters dust around your feet, lifting the lantern flames just enough to cast dancing shadows on the buildings. The saloon door creaks as someone steps out, wiping their hands on an apron. A piano plinks from inside, tentative, off-key, as though someone is trying to remember a tune, and their fingers forgot. Beyond the stories, conversations ripple through smaller knots of people. A ranch hand talks about a missing calf. A merchant mentions a shipment arriving next week, weather permitting, wagon permitting, universe permitting. A quiet woman in a blue shawl tells a friend she saw a shooting star last night and made a wish she won't reveal. All of it blends into a gentle chorus of humanity, tired, dusty, but still gently hopeful. You drift away from the cluster and walk along the main road. Lanterns hang from hooks or nails, or improvised contraptions involving rope and hope. Their light spills in soft golden circles that overlap like small, warm islands in the dusk. A figure waves to you from a porch, an older woman shelling beans into a tin bowl. She gestures for you to join her. You climb the steps and sit beside her, feeling the warmth of the wooden boards under your palms. Without looking up, she says, "You hear the ghost horse story yet?" You nod. She snorts. "Nonsense. Ghosts don't waste time haunting horses. They got better things to do." You ask what she thinks the glowing figure was. She pauses, tapping a bean lightly against the rim of the bowl. Could have been bandits trying to scare travelers. Could have been swamp gas. Could have been that fool neighbor of mine who likes to paint things white and wander around at night. She shrugs. Hard to say. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some frontier communities believe that painting animals or objects white protected them from spirits or made them more visible to wandering souls. Historians still debate whether this came from superstition or practicality. A soft breeze sweeps the porch, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke. Somewhere nearby, a coyote calls out a long, rising note that echoes across the plains. The woman pauses, listening, then nods approvingly. "Sounds healthy," she says, as though diagnosing a distant cousin. After a while, she stands, stretches her back, and tells you she must finish her chores before the temperature drops too much. You thank her for the company and climb down from the porch. The sky above deepens into velvet black, sprinkled with stars bright enough to make you forget the towns and noise of modern life. You wander toward the well again, the lantern light catching flickers of dust in the air. A couple walks by, sharing a quiet conversation. A man ties up his horse for the night, brushing its mane with long, soothing strokes. A young girl sits on the general store steps, counting small, polished stones under the lamplight. You take a slow breath. The night is peaceful. Not silent, never silent, but full of gentle, living noises that fit together like pieces of a sleepy puzzle. A voice calls out from behind you. "You settling in all right?" It's the sheriff, leaning against a post with his thumbs hooked lazily in his belt. His badge glints faintly in the lantern glow. "Good," he says without waiting for your answer. "Just remember, if someone tells you they can sell you a guaranteed treasure map, they're lying. Probably." You nod, because honestly that sounds like a helpful tip. The sheriff gives a lazy wave and heads off toward the far end of town, leaving you alone with the quiet hum of evening life. You look around at the lantern-lit porches, the soft shadows, the glow leaking from windows like warm breath, and you realize you've made it through another piece of the day, not without dust, not without confusion, not without meeting at least 3 strange objects hung on fences for mysterious reasons. But you're still here. Night settles fully across the town like a thick wool blanket, a little scratchy, a little warm, and carrying the faint scent of smoke and sagebrush. The air cools quickly now, enough to make you pull your borrowed coat a little tighter around your shoulders. In the daytime, the west feels huge and loud. At night, it feels huge and quiet, quiet in a way that makes every sound matter. Lanterns swing softly from porch posts, their golden halos swaying with each whisper of wind. Shadows stretch long across the ground, growing darker and more confident with every passing minute. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorts in its sleep. A chair creaks lazily on a front porch. A moth throws itself repeatedly against a lamplight, like it's auditioning for a role it isn't prepared for. You walk down the middle of the road again, because that's what people do in frontier towns after sundown. The dust is cool beneath your boots now, almost silky, and each step leaves a faint imprint that will be half erased by morning wind. A major historical fact drifts in like a lantern glow. In many frontier towns, night was considered the most unpredictable time. Not necessarily because of danger, but because light was limited, making sound the primary sense for navigation, safety, and social life. People listened carefully to horses, to footsteps, to distant gunshots, to coyotes, to neighbors arguing about beans. You pause and listen the same way they did. No gunshots. Good start. A gust of wind carries voices from a nearby cabin, soft laughter, a clatter of dishes, the unmistakable sound of someone dropping something and pretending they didn't. These little noises knit together into a living soundscape that feels oddly comforting. You're just passing the saloon when the doors swing open, releasing a burst of warm light and noise, a fiddle scratching out a lively tune, boots thudding on floorboards, and a handful of shouts that sound more celebratory than concerning. Inside, the air smells like whiskey, sawdust, sweat, and the collective willpower of people pretending they know how to dance. A man stumbles out, grinning broadly. "Evenin'," he says, tipping his hat so enthusiastically it nearly flies off. You nod politely. He nods back. Then he nods again, and a third time, because he's not entirely sure if the second one counted. You leave him to his wobbling and move on. A soft glow draws your attention to a small alley beside the butcher's shop. Normally, alleys are where questionable things happen, but this one smells like bread and herbs, because the butcher's wife does her late-night cooking here, away from the heat of the day. She's kneading dough on a wooden table, rolling it with steady, practiced movements. She glances up and smiles. "Hungry?" she asks. "Always, in any century." You nod. She hands you a small piece of still warm bread, the kind that melts against your teeth with the softness of a cloud. You eat it slowly, savoring the warmth that spreads through your chest. She returns to kneading, humming a lullaby older than the town itself. You thank her and continue walking. Near the edge of town, you spot several ranch hands gathered around a dim fire, talking quietly. Their voices drift on the wind, stories about cattle drives, lost boots, stubborn mules, and one case of mistaken identity involving a goat, a hat, and a moonless night. You don't catch all the details, but you're okay with that. The mystery adds charm. Then you notice something curious. Above the men, tied to the rafters of a small shed, hangs a bundle of dried sage and a coil of braided horsehair. One of the ranchers sees your gaze and chuckles. "Protection charm," he explains. "Keeps bad luck out of the barn." Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. In some parts of the frontier, people hung braided horsehair or bundles of dried herbs above doorways to repel misfortune or wandering spirits. Historians still debate whether this practice had indigenous origins, European origins, or was simply invented by someone who ran out of normal decorating ideas. You walk past the fire and out toward the open land. The night beyond town is vast and dark and strangely comforting. The stars blaze with rare clarity, so many they look like spilled white sand across velvet. You tilt your head back, letting the sky settle into your chest. A coyote yips somewhere in the distance. Another answers, The sound is sharp but not frightening, more like nighttime gossip than a threat. You listen for a while, until a sound behind you makes you turn. Soft footsteps in the dirt. You glance back and see a teenager from earlier, the one who was practicing cornet in the afternoon, walking slowly with a lantern in hand. He stops when he sees you. "Ma says I gotta check the chicken coop before bed," he explains, embarrassed by the task but determined to complete it anyway. You nod, letting him pass. The lantern sways with each step, painting long gold streaks over the ground. You continue your walk toward the open field just beyond the last cabin. Crickets hum gently. The wind carries a whispering, brushing sound as it moves through tall grasses. You kneel down, running your fingers across the blades. They're cool now, slick with early dew, soft against your skin. You breathe in. The air is crisp, cleaner than anything you've felt all day. As you stand, you look back toward town. Lanterns flicker in windows, small and warm against the dark. Smoke rises from chimneys in thin curls. The saloon glows like a noisy lighthouse. This moment, somehow, feels both lonely and full, quiet and alive. The Old West has a way of doing that. But even in the hushed calm, you sense something shifting. A faint rumble, a distant flash of light, maybe lightning, maybe someone dropping a wagon wheel again. Hard to say. The sheriff's earlier weather warning returns to your mind, echoing with subtle irony. You turn back toward town, heading for the safety of warm porches and flickering lamps. The night may be calm, but the West never guarantees it stays that way. Still, you've made it to nightfall far longer than you were warned you'd last. You return to town just as a deeper hush settles over the streets, a quiet that isn't born from peace, but from anticipation. Something subtle moves through the air now, something sharper than the evening breeze. The lantern flames tremble, flickering sideways as wind begins threading its cool fingers through the gaps between buildings. You pause in the middle of the road, listening. The air carries new sounds. A far-off rumble, low and wavering. The rustle of laundry left drying too long. The slight creak of a shutter that wasn't loose an hour ago. Even the animals seem to sense the shift. Horses stomp softly, dogs lift their heads, and chickens make that faint, worried cluck that means we're reconsidering all our life choices. A major historical fact rolls in like a slow cloud across your mind. Storms on the frontier weren't just weather, they were events. With few natural barriers, wind could sweep across miles of open land, bringing dust, lightning, hail, or cold air with astonishing speed. Travelers and townsfolk alike lived at the mercy of skies that changed their mood faster than a saloon gambler losing his last coin. You feel a drop of something cold on your cheek. Rain? Dew? Atmospheric foreshadowing? Hard to say. The West enjoys keeping you guessing. A woman rushes past you. Arms full of blankets, she's pulling off a clothesline. "Storm's gonna hit quick," she says, breathless. "Best find a roof." Another man jogs by carrying a basket of tools, muttering something about "fix it" before it rattles off the wall again. You get the sense this town treats storms like mildly inconvenient relatives, loud, disruptive, but expected. You make your way toward the saloon, whose windows glow warmly against the rising wind. Inside seems like a safe place to wait. On your way, a wooden sign above the apothecary bangs repeatedly against its chains, making a sound similar to two pans arguing. You step under the awning just as another gust sweeps through, sending a tumbleweed bouncing dramatically across the street. It rolls, pauses, rolls again, clearly showing off. Before you slip inside, you hear a sharp whistle behind you. Turning, you see the sheriff standing on the porch of his office, watching the sky with a thoughtful frown. "Storm lines moving fast," he says, tapping his thumb against his belt. "Could be a quick one, could be a long one." Historians still debate whether the clouds listen to us or just do what they want. That sounds right. A flash of light streaks across the distant sky, silent at first, then followed by a low, lazy roll of thunder. Not threatening yet, just introducing itself. You step into the saloon. The interior is a warm refuge lamplight flickering across polished wood, the smell of sawdust and whiskey blending with the faint scent of biscuits. A few people look up as you enter, giving the universal frontier nod of acknowledgement. A piano sits quiet now, abandoned by whoever was torturing it earlier. You take a seat near the wall, as the bartender wipes down a glass with a rag that's not making anything cleaner but is trying its best. He glances at the door. "Storm coming?" You nod. He nods back, adding, "Better than customers throwing punches, I guess." Two men at a nearby table are quietly debating whether this storm will blow through harmless or take half the town with it. You notice neither of them has actually looked outside in the last 10 minutes. Frontier meteorology at its finest. Meanwhile, a woman at another table knits with impressive speed, either because she's concentrating or because she's attempting to finish her row before the lights flicker. Just then, someone bursts in through the doors, letting in a gust of wind and a flurry of dust. He slams the doors behind him and yells, "It's coming from the north." Everyone groans. Someone mutters, "Of course it is." You don't know why that matters, but everyone else seems to, so you nod solemnly. After a few minutes, curiosity pulls you back outside. You step onto the porch, gripping the railing as the wind pushes harder. Your coat flaps behind you like it's trying to escape. The night sky now carries a thin streak of clouds, long and dark, like someone dragged a charcoal stick across the stars. Lightning flickers again, brighter this time, slicing through the darkness in a crooked line. The air smells different too, sharper, colder, charged with a metallic edge that raises the hairs on your arms. Across the street, someone struggles to latch their shutters. A teenager fights with a stubborn wooden door that refuses to close. A horse neighs nervously, tugging at its rope. The wind suddenly shifts direction, swirling dust into small twisting funnels that race along the ground before unraveling. They look playful until one nearly knocks over a bucket, at which point they look passive-aggressively destructive. A few people stand, in their doorways, watching the sky like it owes them rent. Another flash splits the sky closer this time. Thunder follows almost immediately, rumbling low and long like the earth clearing its throat. You take a slow breath as the first real drops of rain begin to fall, big, cold, heavy splats that hit the dirt with soft thuds. The wind carries the scent of wet earth, fresh and familiar, like the world finally exhaling after a long day. As the rain picks up, the townsfolk retreat indoors, one by one. Lamps glow brighter inside homes. Curtains flutter as windows are closed. Doors thud softly into place. You slip back into the saloon just before the rain strengthens, pattering against the roof with steady insistence. The room feels tighter now, more intimate, filled with the warm hum of people waiting out nature's show. A few travelers share stories of storms they rode through, some terrifying, some funny, and one involving an unlucky man who tried to outrun lightning on foot. No, one confirms whether he succeeded. Lightning flashes again, illuminating the bottles behind the bar in a sudden burst of silver. Thunder answers loudly, shaking the windows just enough to make a few people sit up straighter. The storm is here, but you're inside, safe, warm, dry for now. And as the night deepens, you feel yourself settling into the cadence of the Old West. Unpredictable skies, tired laughter, and the sense that while the world may rattle, it will hold. The storm settles in with the confidence of something that has absolutely no intention of leaving anytime soon. Inside the saloon, the lanterns sway ever so slightly, their glass chimneys rattling each time a gust of wind slams against the building. The roof groans under the weight of sudden rain, heavy, hard, and relentless, like someone up there is emptying buckets directly onto the shingles. You take a seat closer to the wall, but not too close. Frontier walls weren't exactly known for being waterproof. The wooden boards hum faintly as thunder rolls overhead. Every now and then, a flash of lightning slips through the slatted shutters, bathing the entire room in momentary white before the dim lantern glow reclaims the space. You watch dust drift from the rafters each time the thunder cracks. The saloon isn't falling apart yet, but it's being reminded of its age. Everyone inside pretends not to notice. A major historical fact joins you like a quiet companion. Storms in the 19th century West could last for hours or days, flooding streets, soaking supplies, and leaving towns temporarily cut off from trade or travel. Many settlers described them as the most isolating experiences of frontier life. Loud, consuming, and inescapable. Tonight's storm might not last days, but it certainly feels committed. The bartender wipes the same spot on the bar repeatedly, clearly using the motion as a coping mechanism. "Seen worse," he says, though you doubt it. At a corner table, a group of path locals huddle closer together. Their conversation has slipped from rumors into full-on story mode. Storms have a way of pulling narratives out of people like threads from a worn coat. Someone is describing the Great Roof Incident of '73, which reportedly involved a chimney collapse, a confused cow, and an unlucky poker table. No one agrees on the details, but everyone agrees it was memorable. Nearby, a quiet older woman sits with a tin cup of tea. She's watching the room with the calm understanding of someone who has lived through enough storms to know panicking is a waste of energy. She gestures for you to join her. "First time weathering one here?" she asks. You nod. She leans back in her chair, folding her hands over her lap. "Don't worry. Buildings creak louder than they break. Most of the time." The thunder punctuates her sentence with a dramatic boom. She doesn't flinch. You pretend you didn't either. Rain pours harder now, sheets of water slapping the ground outside. A drip begins forming near the corner of the ceiling, dripping rhythmically into a bucket that someone has placed beneath it with the weary speed of a person who expected this. The sound is surprisingly soothing, a gentle, repetitive plink, plink, plink. The saloon pianist decides this is the perfect moment to resume playing, choosing a slow, melancholy tune that hovers somewhere between lullaby and funeral march. Despite that strange in-between quality, it somehow fits perfectly with the cozy tension of the moment. Another lightning flash fills the room. A baby somewhere upstairs begins crying. A few people look up, as though the storm is doing this specifically to annoy them. You step over to the window and peek outside. The street looks different now, soaked, dark, blurred by sheets of rain. Water streams down the uneven road, collecting in small trenches dug by wagon wheels. The lampposts shake slightly in the wind, their flames flickering but holding strong. A figure darts from one porch to another, clutching something under their coat, maybe bread, maybe a blanket, maybe just a stubborn determination to get home before the storm worsens. Their boots splash through puddles, leaving trails that the rain immediately erases. You pull back from the window as another gust shakes the saloon. The shutters clatter like loose teeth. In the corner, a man mutters, "If that thing falls off again, I ain't fixing it till morning." It is unclear whether he owns the shutter or is simply tired of it on principle. The older woman beside you continues her tea. "You know," she says, "my grandmother used to say storms were the West's way of making sure we remembered who was in charge." You ask who she thought was in charge. She smiles. "Not us. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the night. Some frontier families believe storms carried messages, warnings, guidance, or even cleansing energy. Others believed thunder was the sound of restless spirits riding across the sky. Historians still debate whether this belief came from imported folklore, indigenous influence, or simple human attempts to make sense of loud noises in the dark. Another crack of thunder, a sharper one jolts everyone slightly. A few poker players at a table decide to fold early, claiming they can't concentrate with the sky trying to smack us. The bartender lights an extra lantern, setting it near the center of the room. Its warm glow spills outward, softening the tension. People shift closer together, instinctively seeking the comfort of shared space. A ranch hand begins telling a story about a night, years ago, when a lightning bolt struck a fence post so hard it split the entire thing in half. Another swears he saw a wagon lifted off the ground once. Someone else claims storms sharpen their intuition. You suspect storms sharpen their storytelling more than anything else. The wind howls, suddenly a long, low moan that threads through the cracks in the wooden walls. It sends a shiver not of cold but of awe down your spine. The pianist switches to a warmer tune now, almost cheerful, as though trying to soothe the storm into behaving itself. The melody blends with the patter of rain, the soft murmur of conversation, and the occasional thunderclap. For a moment, the whole room feels like it's breathing together, rising and falling in calm unison. The storm rages on, but inside, the warmth grows. People relax their shoulders, voices soften, a few children doze off against parents, and you find yourself settling into the rhythm of the night, realizing that this town, dusty, stubborn, quirky, knows how to survive storms better than anything else. You lean back in your chair, watching lantern light flicker on faces and walls. The wind can roar, the thunder can shout, but here, in this room, Everything feels steady. The storm begins its slow retreat, not suddenly, not dramatically, but with the quiet exhale of something finally tiring itself out. The thunder grows more distant, rolling in softer, slower waves. Lightning flashes less frequently now, each one dimmer, its bright edges blurring into the thick night clouds. The saloon has settled into a hush that feels almost sacred. People speak in lower tones, as though raising their voices might invite the storm back. A few travelers have fallen asleep where they sit, slumped over tables or leaning against posts, lulled into drowsiness by the rhythmic patter of rain and the warmth of lantern light. You pull in a long, slow breath. The air inside is humid but comforting wood, smoke, wool, and that lingering scent of rain-soaked dust drifting through the cracks. A major historical fact drifts gently into the calm. Frontier buildings were notorious for leaking after storms, and cleanup often lasted well into the next day. Roof shingles swelled, floors warped, and walls soaked up moisture like sponges. Many settlers described post-storm mornings as swabbing the inside of a ship that had no business being at sea. You glance around. The comparison feels accurate. A bucket in the corner continues its steady plink. Plink. Plink, catching water that has found its way through a knot in the ceiling. The bartender has placed a second bucket near the back wall, just in case. The pianist finally stops playing, flexing his fingers with a groan. Someone claps politely, possibly because they enjoyed the music, possibly because they're relieved it's over. Hard to tell. You notice the sheriff standing near the door, arms crossed, listening to the diminishing storm. His eyes scan the street outside like he's checking for anything out of place, loose signs, toppled barrels, runaway chickens. You join him near the doorway, leaning on the opposite frame. Looks like it's moving on, he says without looking at you. You nod. Every storm leaves a mess, he continues. But folks here know how to handle messes. Just part o' living. He pauses, squinting. And part o' complaining. Mostly complaining. He gives a half smile before heading back into the room. A few brave souls begin stepping outside now. The worst has passed, and curiosity outweighs caution. You follow them into the open air. The world outside smells wonderful wet earth, sagebrush, and that indescribable scent of rain meeting dust. The road glistens in patches of standing water, reflecting the lanterns like pools of melted gold. Puddles ripple gently, with the last stray drops falling from rooftops. The temperature has dropped noticeably, wrapping the town in a cool, refreshing embrace. You take a deep breath and feel your lungs fill with it. A horse snorts nearby, shaking off moisture in a full-body ripple that sends droplets flying. A dog wanders into the road, sniffing every inch, as though the storm personally rearranged all the smells, and he must recatalogue them. A group of neighbors gathers near, the general store, inspecting the state of things. The shopkeeper sighs dramatically while poking at a fallen wooden crate. You suspect it's mostly for show. He seems like the type who enjoys making small problems sound heroic. Could have been worse, someone says. Always could have been, someone else replies. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some frontier communities viewed the passing of a storm as a cleansing moment, symbolically starting anew. To mark it, a few households lit small bundles of herbs or incense indoors, believing the smoke reset the energy of the home. Historians still debate whether this was spiritual practice, superstition, or just a creative attempt to combat wet dog smell after the rain. A faint breeze stirs, carrying with it a few final raindrops falling from eaves. The clouds begin to break apart slightly, revealing scattered stars peeking through like shy observers. You walk down the road a bit, enjoying the quiet. Everything feels slowed, softened. The storm has scrubbed the day's heat and dust from the air, leaving the world feeling new, cleaner, calmer, a little more forgiving. You pause at the fence line and run your hand along the damp wood. The grain feels cool beneath your fingers. Drops cling to the edges, catching stray beams of lamplight like tiny beads of glass. A shadow crosses the road, a large one. You hold your breath. But then you see the culprit. A cow that somehow escaped its pen during the storm and is now wandering with a sense of mild confusion. A ranch hand jogs after it, whisper yelling in a way that suggests this cow is a repeat offender. Behind you, the saloon doors swing open again, letting out warm light and muffled conversation. A man steps onto the porch, hands shoved in his pockets, hair plastered to his head. "Well," he says, looking up at the sky, "at least the dust'll stay down tomorrow." You find yourself smiling. You wander toward the well again. A few people have, gathered around, discussing whether the storm will return or if this was its only visit tonight. Predictions vary widely. One man swears he can smell lightning. Another insists the wind is too calm. Someone else says their left knee never lies. You decide the knee expert seems the most trustworthy. Across the street, you notice a curtain lift slightly in one of the houses. A child peeks out, eyes wide, checking if the storm monster has truly gone. When they spot lanterns shining and adults laughing softly, they let the curtain fall. You stand still for a long moment, feeling the quiet settle inside you. The storm's roar has faded into a gentle hush, and the town is wrapped in a cozy stillness that feels rare and fleeting. The Old West has given you yet another moment of unexpected peace. A final rumble echoes far away, a reminder that storms never leave without saying a proper goodbye. But here, in this wet, glistening town, the night feels safe again. The town exhales fully now, the storm's departure, leaving behind a stillness so deep it almost hums. Midnight settles over everything, like a velvet blanket, soft, dark, and gently heavy. The last scattered voices fade into doorways. Lamps are turned down low. Curtains fall shut. Even the saloon grows quiet, its laughter dimming to murmurs, then to soft clinks of glass and the occasional tired sigh. You step slowly through the center of the road, your boots sinking slightly into damp earth. The world feels washed clean, refreshed, renewed, and cooled in every sense. The air carries the faint perfume of wet sage and the earthy sweetness that rises only after heavy rain. Your breath fogs just slightly in the chill. Above you, the sky has opened fully. Stars sprawl across it, sharp and bright, like someone scattered a handful of silver dust over ink. The moon slips through broken clouds, its light pale and hazy, making the road gleam in faint patches. A major historical fact joins you like a quiet companion on this midnight walk. Most frontier towns had no streetlights at all, relying solely on lanterns hung from windows or carried by hand. Night travel was dangerous, not because of gunfighters or beasts, but because you simply couldn't see anything. Roads, animals, holes, or the occasional angry rooster that refused to go to bed. You step carefully. You don't trust the roosters either. The buildings around you creak softly as they dry, wood expanding and contracting with slow pops and sighs. Somewhere to your left, water drips from a porch roof steady, rhythmic, like a ticking clock carved out of rain. A thin plume of smoke rises from the chimney of the boarding house, faint as breath. Someone inside is keeping the stove burning through the night. The glow from their window flickers gently, a soft golden promise that no one here sleeps entirely alone. You walk toward the outskirts again, where the world grows dimmer still. The last porch lamps cast only small, wavering halos in the dark. Beyond them lies the open prairie, vast, dark, endless. It feels like stepping toward the edge of the known world. You don't go too far. The quiet out there feels older, deeper, something you respect but don't want to test. A soft shuffle in the dirt behind you makes you freeze. For a moment, you imagine ghosts, bandits, coyotes, or that one neighbor who likes painting things white for supernatural reasons. You slowly turn. It's a donkey. Just a donkey. He wanders past you, unfazed, chewing a mouthful of something you hope is edible. He gives you a slow, judgmental glance, the universal donkey expression before continuing on his midnight stroll. You let out the breath you were holding. The breeze shifts again, carrying faint sounds with it. A baby coughing, a kettle whistling in someone's kitchen, the low murmur of two people talking in hushed, intimate tones from a porch you can't quite see. These sounds rise and fade like gentle tides. Another step, another sound, a distant coyote call, softer than before, probably talking about the storm, just like the humans in town did. The response comes from farther away, a pair of short yips, almost playful. The night's conversations cross species without any difficulty. As you walk, you notice something hanging from the eaves of a small cabin, a braided string with beads, feathers, and a small coin woven into it. Intrigued, you step closer. The cabin's owner emerges from the shadows, leaning on her cane with surprising stealth. She nods at the charm. "Nightwood," she says. You tilt your head. She explains your obscure cultural tidbit. Some frontier families, especially those influenced by indigenous neighbors or by European folk traditions, created nightwood charms to guard against bad dreams, wandering spirits, or restless energy during storms. They often combined feathers, stones, coins, or anything that felt right. She shrugs. Historians still debate whether it worked or just made people feel better. You thank her. She nods once more before slipping back into her darkened home. You continue walking, though slower now. Midnight on the frontier isn't a time for rushing. It's a time for settling, listening, letting the world tilt into a gentler rhythm. The dust under your boots is cool and soft like sifted flour. A barn owl glides silently over your head, wings stretched wide, catching moonlight as it cuts across the quiet sky. You watch it disappear over the rooftops without a single flap or sound. It feels like witnessing magic. Subtle, quiet magic that doesn't need applause. You reach the well again. The bucket sits still, rope dripping faintly. A lantern left nearby glows dim but steady. You take a seat on the edge of the wooden platform, feeling its damp chill seep through your clothes. From here, you can see almost the whole town. The low rooftops still shining faintly with rainwater. The narrow road curving quietly into the dark. The lonely windmill turning just enough to whisper. The windows glowing like sleepy little campfires. And above it all, the endless, star-filled sky. You sit for a long moment, breathing deeply. The quiet doesn't press on you. It holds you, gently, slowly, like a long exhale after a long day. The Old West, for all its harshness and grit, has moments of softness so deep you can feel them in your bones. This is one of those moments. You stand up eventually, stretching your back, letting the cool air wrap around you like a shawl. The night is fully yours now, and you realize you've made it halfway through this long frontier day. You've faced heat, dust, rumors, storms, stories, and wandering livestock. You are, surprisingly, still alive, still calm, still walking. The first hint of dawn appears softly, so softly that at first you think it's just the lantern near the well dimming in a slow, sleepy sigh. But then you notice the horizon, a faint ribbon of grey-blue easing upward, pushing back the last stretch of night. The stars soften, the moon bows out, the sky lifts its edges like someone gently pulling open a curtain. The town is still mostly asleep. Doors remain shut, windows dark, chimneys silent. A quiet stillness lingers in every corner, the kind that only exists after a storm has passed and before the first rooster decides to ruin everything. You stretch, feeling the weight of your bones after a night that wasn't exactly restful. Frontier sleep is more of a suggestion than a guarantee, but there's something refreshing about the early coolness, like the world hasn't remembered its responsibilities yet. Your breath fogs faintly as you walk down the road. The dirt is darker now, still damp, soft enough to hold footprints. Your boots leave clear impressions, tiny records of your survival. The wooden porches look freshly washed, their boards darkened by rain. The town smells of wet wood, clean earth, and the faint trace of ash from stoves that burn through the night. A major historical fact greets you quietly in the dim light. For many frontier settlers, dawn was the most important working hour of the day. Before heat, before chores piled up, before dust and wind returned, people rushed to do as much as possible in these early cool hours, fetching water, fixing fences, tending livestock, or simply breathing before the world grew loud again. You pass the saloon, its lanterns finally extinguished, its doors shut. A few snoring sounds drift through the walls, evidence of travelers who decided the tables or floors were good enough beds for one night. A cat stretches on the porch rail, arching its back like it personally wrestled the storm yesterday. Near the general store, you hear the soft clink of metal. The shopkeeper is already awake, unlocking the door with a sigh so dramatic you can hear it from several yards away. He glances at you, raises a tired hand in greeting, and mutters, "Storm knocked over all my crates." Again, you nod sympathetically, even if you suspect he enjoys the excuse to tell stories about it later. The sky brightens further, now a pale silver blue. Birds begin chirping from the eaves and fences, shaking off droplets of water. A few flutter to the road, pecking at seeds washed loose by the rain. Their chirps echo between buildings like small bells. You wander toward the livery stable. The early morning light casts long shadows across the open entryway. Inside, the stable hand from yesterday is brushing down a horse, still bleary-eyed. He looks like he's been awake since before the sun. "Storm spooked him," he says, patting the horse's flank. "Didn't sleep none." You're not sure if he means the horses or himself. Both seem likely. A quiet shuffle draws your attention to the far stall, where one of the horses is eating its hay with a slow, meditative intensity. Each chew says, "Don't talk to me until after breakfast." You respect its boundaries. As you leave, you hear a rooster crow in the distance. Then another, louder and more committed, like it's trying to win some invisible competition. Within seconds, the whole town erupts with rooster enthusiasm. The peace of dawn shatters like thin ice. You wince. The Old West wakes up aggressively. Passing the blacksmith's shop, you see him standing outside, staring up at the roof with a grim expression. A new hole gapes between two shingles, courtesy of the storm. He sighs, rubs his forehead, and says to the sky, "Of course." You keep walking. Repairing roofs before breakfast seems like a very frontier thing to do, but you're not about to volunteer. A woman steps out of her cabin wearing a shawl and holding a broom. She sweeps water off her porch with steady strokes. She looks at you, nods politely, and says, "Mornin'." You return the greeting. She points her chin toward the horizon. "Gonna be hot today." You look. The rising light already carries a warm undertone. The world is gearing itself up for another long, dusty fight with the sun. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for this hour. Many frontier households burned dried sage or juniper in the early morning, not for rituals, but to keep insects away as the day warmed. The scent lingered in kitchens and porches, giving mornings a distinctive herbal smell. Historians still debate whether it worked as pest control or simply made everyone smell like a walking bundle of firewood. Turning the corner, you spot a rancher carrying 2 large buckets of water from the well, moving with the stiff, half-conscious gait of someone who hasn't had breakfast yet. He nods at you without fully opening his eyes. "You from around here?" he asks automatically. "No. You. Answer." He nods again. "Didn't think so. You're too clean." It's the closest thing to a compliment you'll get at this hour. You step aside as he trudges past. By now, the town begins to wake in earnest. Doors open, voices murmur, livestock stir behind fences. The windmill creaks back to life, turning slowly, its blades glinting faintly in the rising light. You take a seat on a low wooden bench near the road, letting dawn unfold across the landscape. The hills glow softly as sunlight slides down their slopes. Light pools between the buildings, like honey. The town is tired. You are tired. But there's something peaceful about surviving a frontier midnight and emerging into a frontier dawn. It feels earned, like a quiet badge of honor. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness in your shoulders. You've made it farther into the Old West than most modern travelers would. You've lasted a full day and night without air conditioning, electricity, or running water. That alone deserves a medal. And yet the next stretch of day is waiting. Heat will rise. Chores will multiply. Rumors will spread. Animals will cause mischief. The West never takes a break. The sun climbs slowly above the horizon, shedding its soft dawn gentleness and beginning to sharpen into the familiar, unwavering glare of the frontier morning. The coolness evaporates bit by bit, replaced by a warm hint that by noon will absolutely turn into a full-blown negotiation between you and heatstroke. You stand up from your bench and stretch your arms with the slow, reluctant motion of someone who knows the next few hours involve chores, a word that feels timelessly disappointing in every era. Around you, the town wakes fully now, still groggy, still recovering from the storm, but somehow already busy. Frontier towns do not believe in rest. Rest is suspicious. You take a few steps toward the main road, where the early work has officially begun. A man hammers a loose board back into place on the saloon porch, stopping every 3 hits to glare at the nail, like it personally wronged him. On the other side of the street, 2 women sweep their porches with determined, storm grudge energy, pushing water and debris into small puddles that will dry soon enough. A major historical fact arrives right on cue. In many 19th century frontier towns, morning chores took up more time than any other part of the day. Tending animals, collecting water, repairing storm damage, preparing meals, chopping wood, sewing, checking traps, mending fences, and hauling firewood were all daily tasks, often completed before breakfast. So yes, you're already behind schedule. But luckily, no one here is keeping track of your productivity. You wander toward the edge of town, where several ranchers are fixing a damaged section of fence. The storm ripped 2 slats clean off, leaving an opening large enough for a goat or a particularly motivated cow to slip through. One of the ranchers holds up a broken plank and shakes his head. "Wind took it like a playing card," he says. Another man hands you a spare nail, likely assuming you're here to help. You hand it right back, which is your polite way of saying, "Absolutely not." He shrugs and moves on. Nearby, a chicken coop door hangs crookedly from its hinges. A young boy tries to fix it while 4 chickens supervise with deep concern. When the boy drops a nail, the chickens leap back as if he threw a grenade. "They're dramatic," he mutters without looking up. You decide not to get too close. Chickens, as you've learned, have strong opinions and very little respect for personal space. As you head back toward the center of town, you pass a woman hanging fresh laundry again because the storm drenched everything she washed yesterday. She gives you a tired nod. "Second time this week," she says, "and it's only... What day is it?" You don't know. She doesn't know. No one knows. Frontier weeks feel eternal. A few buildings down, the blacksmith is already stoking his forge. Sparks leap into the morning air, flashing like tiny sunspots before fading into nothing. He wipes his brow, even though it's too early to be sweating, and grumbles something about roofs and insurance not existing yet. You wonder if blacksmiths were born grumpy, or if the job made them that way. Definitely the job. You drift toward the general store next. Its door stands open, the shopkeeper rearranging goods on the porch. He's restacking crates the storm knocked over, though you're pretty sure he's stacking them in the exact same unstable configuration as before. You suspect that crate avalanche is an ongoing subplot in his life. He sees you and lifts a small jar. "Pickles," he announces proudly. "Survived the storm." You congratulate him. He nods solemnly, like the pickles earned a medal. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the morning. Pickling was so widespread in frontier towns that some families kept their own pickle diaries, small notebooks, tracking recipes, brine strengths, shelf lives, and accidental explosions. Historians still debate whether these diaries were practical guides or simply passion projects for people who really, really liked vinegar. You step aside as the mail rider from last night trots through town again. Hat pulled low, horse mud splattered from the storm. He doesn't stop this time, just tips his hat and keeps going, his saddle creaking in the cool morning air. You head toward the well, where a line has already formed. Everyone holds buckets, jugs, or barrels, each person wearing the same expression, resigned acceptance. Water hauling is the #1 frontier chore, and it's not even close. A woman ahead of you in line sighs. "Storm filled the creek," she says, "but that water's for horses, not for people. Horses'll drink anything." She pauses, then adds, "People, we pretend we won't." You reach the front and lower the bucket, hearing the rope creak as it spirals downward. The bucket splashes into cool water below, and the sound echoes up the well like a tiny underwater church bell. You pull the rope back up, arms burning slightly. Frontier life is just unpaid weightlifting. As you pour the water into your canteen, a man nearby mutters to no one in particular. "Storm cleaned the air at least. Dust'll come back, but for now, feels like breath in silk." He's right. The air is crisp, clear, almost luxurious. You take a slow breath as a light breeze stirs your coat. The sun is higher now, warming the tops of buildings, turning puddles into shimmering mirrors. You can already see the steam rising off roofs where rainwater evaporates. And then, from across the road, you hear the sheriff's voice. "Town meeting in 10 minutes. Repairs and chores list." Ah, this is how frontier mornings get even busier. People groan in unison. A man mutters, "I knew if the storm didn't kill me, the meeting would." The sheriff stands on a small platform outside his office, adjusting his hat like someone preparing for emotional labor. "Got a list," he says, waving a crumpled paper. "Storm damage, chores, volunteers needed." You wonder if volunteers means everyone. As he begins reading the list, wagon wheels, broken fences, clogged drainage, loose shutters, missing chickens, you realize something important. Frontier life isn't glamorous. It isn't epic. It isn't filled with dramatic standoffs at high noon. It's this: morning chores, rebuilding, sweeping, fixing, refixing. And yet, there's something strangely peaceful about it. You're still here. You're still standing. You're still surviving a world where chores are endless, but community is strong. By the time the town meeting ends, and by ends, you mean dissolves into people wandering off to avoid direct eye contact with the sheriff the sun has climbed, high enough to reclaim its rightful title as unquestioned tyrant of the West. The pleasant dawn coolness is gone. The air thickens, shadows shrink, and everything, absolutely everything, starts to feel too bright, too hot, and too loud. You wipe your forehead with a sleeve, though it doesn't help. The heat clings to your skin like an overeager relative refusing to leave after dinner. The last storm puddle evaporates in front of you with a hiss that feels personal. The sheriff folds his chore list back into his pocket. "Heat's going to be rough today," he says in a tone that suggests he's trying to make peace with the universe before noon. You nod. Everyone nods. The entire town nods in collective misery. A major historical fact presses itself into your mind, like someone handing you a damp brochure on frontier suffering. Afternoons in many parts of the Old West regularly exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 43 degrees Celsius, and heat exhaustion was a daily threat. People learned to schedule their lives around the sun's anger, working early, hiding at midday, and accepting that survival required pacing, shade, and constant water. You look around. No one appears excited for the next several hours. The blacksmith has already retreated inside, muttering something about forges weren't meant for heat like this. The stable hand splashes his face with water from a bucket, sending chickens scattering as though he threw boiling oil instead of lukewarm well water. A rancher fans himself with his hat, but it looks more like an act of hope than an actual cooling strategy. You wander down the road, squinting at the sun as it reflects off the wet boards of porches now drying into streaky patterns. The air over the road shimmers faintly, heat gathering itself like a beast inhaling. A woman carrying a large laundry basket steps out of her house, sees the sun, and steps right back inside. "Nope," she says firmly. You admire her boundaries. As you walk past the general store, the shopkeeper sits slouched in a chair under a makeshift shade cloth, something between a tarp and a regret. He fans himself with a pickle jar label. "Storm yesterday," he says. "Now this. Town's trying to kill me." You offer sympathy. He accepts it dramatically. A few steps farther, you find the town's only patch of intentional shade, a large canvas awning stretched between two posts. Under it sits a pair of ranchers eating what appears to be cold beans, straight from a tin. Neither speaks. They're conserving their words for when the air cools. You join them under the shade, and for a few seconds, the world feels manageable again. A soft breeze drifts through hot, but at least moving, and you breathe deeply. Then the breeze stops, dead. Instantly, you feel the sun tighten its grip. The rancher beside you mutters, "The calm before the heat wave." You ask if that's a real phrase. He shrugs. "It is now." You decide to take a walk anyway, slowly, deliberately, the way people walk through heat when they're trying to avoid becoming a cautionary tale. As you move toward the corral, you notice a strange woven structure hanging from a fence post, thin strips of leather braided around a smooth river stone. Curious, you step closer. A nearby woman spots you examining it. "Heat charm," she explains. "Keeps the worst of the sun away." "Does it work?" She tilts her head. Historians still debate that one. There's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some frontier families made heat charms, braids of leather, hair, cloth, or twine wrapped around stones believed to cool the air or ward off the worst of the heat. Whether it worked or simply made people feel hopeful is uncertain. You continue forward. The corral animals look miserable. Cows stand in the shade of a single tree like teenagers crowding around the only phone charger in the house. A horse flaps its lips repeatedly, clearly protesting the temperature. Another rolls in the dust, possibly for comfort, possibly because it ran out of better ideas. You hear someone cursing softly from behind a wagon. You peek around and see a rancher repairing a wheel whose spokes warped from yesterday's storm moisture. The sun, now determined to be petty, is drying the wood unevenly. It creaks in protest. The man wipes his brow. Weather's conspiring against me. You wish you could help, but the frontier has taught you many things, including the fact that wagon repairs require skills you absolutely do not possess. You head back toward town, walking slower now. The heat presses down like a physical weight. Even the breeze feels like someone opening an oven door. Sweat beads on your forehead and neck, running annoyingly into your collar. A boy runs past carrying a bucket of water, but by the time he reaches his destination, half of it has splashed out, either from the motion or from the heat instantly slurping it into vapor. You stop under another overhang and take a long drink from your canteen. The warm water isn't comforting, but it's necessary. If you had a phone, it would probably be sending you 18 hydration reminders by now. Even the sheriff looks wilted as he steps out of his office. "Anyone passes out," he announces, "please fall in the shade." You silently agree to obey. Near the saloon, a group of men sit against the wall, sleeves rolled, hats tilted down over their faces. They look like they've melted slightly into the wood. One lifts a hand and waves lazily. You wave back with equal laziness. The midday hours stretch long and slow. The sun has no intention of taking a break. Every living thing in town adjusts, accepts, endures. And somehow you're still here, exhausted, dusty, sweaty, but surviving. You sit on the porch steps of the boarding house, letting the shade envelop you like a tired hug. The boards are warm beneath you, the air shimmering just beyond the porch edge. Your breathing slows, your muscles loosen. Frontier fatigue settles in. And yet, there's a quiet beauty to the stillness, a strange peace in the heat, a shared understanding among everyone in town. This is just part of the day, part of the rhythm, part of the Old West. The heat settles into its peak, now thick, heavy, and utterly uninterested in your comfort. It presses against your clothes, clings to your skin, and hums through the air like an invisible furnace. Even the flies seem sluggish, drifting in slow, uncertain loops as if reconsidering their life choices. You sit on the boarding house steps for a while longer, trying to summon the willpower to stand. Around you, the town wilts gently. A dog sprawls belly up under the porch, legs splayed in dramatic surrender. A rancher leans against a water barrel like it's the last friend he has. The blacksmith has officially given up and hung a sign on his door that reads, "Back later, maybe." Eventually, you force yourself to move. Not quickly, nothing in this heat is quick, but enough to feel like you're participating in society. You walk down the sun-bleached road, sticking to the shadows of buildings where the temperature is at least slightly less murderous. A major historical fact drifts in like a slow-moving tumbleweed. Travelers often arrived in frontier towns at midday because the morning's cooler air made for easier travel, which meant they reached town precisely when everyone else was too hot to greet them properly. Many diaries describe arriving at a town only to be ignored by every living soul until the sun lost interest, which is exactly what happens now. A wagon creaks into town from the west, pulled by two dusty, exhausted mules who very clearly regret their entire journey. The driver, a tall man with a sunburn that could write its own tragic poem, waves half-heartedly at the townsfolk. No one waves back. They're all too busy pretending not to melt. He shrugs and pulls his wagon toward the well. You give him a sympathetic nod as you pass, and he nods back with the hollow-eyed look of someone who has been awake since the dawn of time. As you continue on, something catches your eye, a thin line of dust rising on the far edge of town. A rider approaches, moving with surprising speed for this heat. The horse's hooves kick up pale clouds as it gallops over the uneven ground. You step into deeper shade as the rider slows near the general store. They dismount in one fluid motion, a woman with a long duster coat, sun-bleached hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and a posture that says she's seen approximately 19 more things than she ever wanted to. She ties her horse to a post and takes off her hat, revealing a face carved with determination, exhaustion, and at least 3 questionable decisions. She walks toward the store with long strides, boots clacking against the dry wood. The shopkeeper perks up the moment she appears. Part curiosity, part fear, part, please don't knock over my crates. Their conversation is quiet at first, but a few words drift your way. Message from the Southern Trail. 3 riders missing. Weather turning strange. You feel a prickle of unease, not sharp, not threatening, but enough to make you stand a little straighter. The woman emerges a moment later, scanning the town with quick, assessing eyes. Her gaze briefly meets yours. She nods, firm, direct, businesslike. The kind of nod that suggests she's too tired to pretend you're not there. She heads toward the sheriff's office. You follow at a respectful distance, because something about her stride says, I don't do small talk. Inside the office, you hear low voices. Serious voices. The sheriff's drawl tightens ever so slightly, a sure sign something unusual is happening. A breeze picks up as you stand outside. Not the hot, miserable kind from earlier, but a new one, cooler, sharper, carrying a hint of distant moisture. You look up at the sky. The blue isn't as crystal clear as before. Thin streaks of grey stretch along the horizon, weaving themselves into subtle patterns. Storms don't usually hit 2 days in a row out here, but then again, the West doesn't care about consistency. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the day. Some frontier travelers believe that storms traveled in families, a big storm, followed by a smaller, younger sibling storm within a day or two. They even had names for them in some communities. Historians still debate whether this pattern was real or just human imagination seeking meaning in chaos. You sit on the porch rail, across from the sheriff's office, waiting, watching, listening to the creak of the wooden awning and the occasional stomp of a horse shifting in discomfort. Minutes pass. The heat continues its stubborn reign, but that shifting breeze carries the promise of change. Finally, the sheriff steps outside. He wipes his forehead and adjusts his hat before leaning against the post beside you. That rider's brought news, he says. You wait. He continues. Band of travelers missing from the Southern Trail. Could be stranded. Could be worse. His jaw tightens. We'll send someone to look once the heat dies down. Can't ride out in this, unless you want to fall over before you're halfway there. You nod. It makes sense. Everything here depends on the weather's permission. The rider steps out behind him, her expression unreadable. She glances at you again, more curious this time, less assessing. You're new, she says flatly. You confirm. You holding up all right? You nod again. She snorts softly. You must be stubborn. You take that as a compliment. A few moments pass before she walks toward her horse, checking its saddle and brushing dust from its sides. The animal leans into her touch, loyal, tired, trusting. The heat throbs against your skin. Even the small excitement of a stranger's arrival begins to fade. Under the weight of the afternoon, the town slips back into its sluggish rhythm. People retreat into shade. Animals seek shelter. The air shimmers once more. You sit there, breathing slowly, letting the afternoon pass like thick syrup. Somehow, you're still here, still standing in a world that demands quiet endurance. You feel the breeze shift again, cooler this time, more insistent, like the sky is whispering a warning, and you realize something's changing. Gently, quietly, but definitely. The afternoon heat reaches its highest, crankiest point, and then something shifts. You feel it first as a faint stir across your skin, a softness in the air where everything had been stiff and heavy. It's subtle, lighter than a sigh, quieter than the rustle of fabric, but it's there. A breeze. A different breeze. A breeze that seems to carry intention. You straighten a little on the porch rail, noticing the way the dust on the road lifts in a thin, swirling ribbon. It doesn't rise far, but it rises enough to make the horses flick their ears and the loose boards on the saloon awning rattle with curiosity. The sky above, which had twisted into a harsh sheet of white blue all afternoon, begins to deepen toward a calmer tone. Wisps of distant clouds stretch across the horizon, faint and streak-like, as though the sky is lightly brushing strokes of paint across itself. A major historical fact floats to the front of your mind. Frontier settlers grew incredibly skilled at reading wind patterns. Sudden shifts in the breeze could mean changing weather, improved travel conditions, or the hint of a storm building dozens of miles away. In diaries and letters, people wrote about wind like it was a neighbor, temperamental, informative, and occasionally rude. This breeze feels informative. You step off the porch and walk slowly toward the center of the road. The dust swirls around your boots, gently before settling again. A few townsfolk peek out from shaded doorways, their squinting eyes tracking the wind as if it's delivering gossip. A rancher leans against a water trough, arms folded, watching the sky with a practiced frown. "Winds turn in early today," he says. Doesn't usually do that unless the weather's thinking about Chung in its mind. You ask what that means. He gives you a shrug so slow and thoughtful it feels like an essay. Could be rain, could be cool air from the mountains, could be nothing, but the wind's talking to us. Just gotta listen. You nod, as though you understand, even though you're fairly certain the wind isn't saying anything directly to you. As you walk farther down the street, you notice laundry on a line fluttering in a new direction. The cloth snaps lightly in the shifting air. A woman rushes out and claps her hands to her hips. "Oh, now you want to dry," she scolds her shirts. "Where was that attitude this morning?" You admire her relationship with the laundry. Farther down, at the edge of the corral, the rider from earlier stands examining the sky. She's quiet, still, almost statuesque. When she senses you near, she turns just enough to acknowledge your presence. "Wind's changing," she murmurs. You agree. She continues watching the horizon. Weather's been strange this year. Storms hitting twice, winds shifting quick, heat dragging longer than usual. You ask if that's dangerous. She gives a small, humorless smile. Everything out here is dangerous. Some things just bother to announce themselves first. A gust moves past a stronger one this time. It carries a coolness that settles on your arms like a subtle blessing. The dust rises again, swirling more enthusiastically, before scattering into nothing. The rider lifts her chin, savoring the wind. Feels like the trail wants to breathe again. You're not sure what that means exactly, but it sounds poetic enough for the moment. As the breeze picks up, more townspeople drift outside, wiping their foreheads, fanning themselves, or simply standing still to enjoy the sensation of air that isn't trying to bake them alive. The saloon door swings open, its hinges creaking with far less protest than earlier. A man steps out, blinking at the breeze like it's a rare treat. "Well, I'll be," he says. "I thought the sun would boil us straight off the map." You hear a faint laugh from the porch next to you. The blacksmith has re-emerged, wiping his hands on a rag that somehow looks even dirtier than before. "Good time for work," he says, gesturing to the sky. "Hammer feels lighter when the wind's right." You're not convinced that's true, but you let him have his moment. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for this hour. Some frontier communities believed that certain winds brought news. North winds carried warnings, south winds brought opportunity, east winds hinted at visitors, and west winds were treated with mild suspicion. Historians still debate whether anyone actually lived by these beliefs, or if they just made excellent excuses for avoiding chores. The wind brushes your face again, cooler now, steadier. With it comes the faintest smell of approaching moisture. Not an impending storm necessarily, but a change. Something new, moving across the prairie. You walk toward the well. A few townsfolk have gathered there, not for water, but for breeze. One leans against the post, eyes closed, letting the wind lift their hair. Another twirls a hat absent-mindedly, enjoying the sensation of air tugging at its brim. You sit on the well's edge, feeling the wood cool beneath you. People drift around the street in slow, contented clusters, talking more freely now that the heat no longer crushes every syllable. The atmosphere loosens, unknots, exhales. The rider from earlier finishes checking her gear, tightening straps on her saddle and brushing dust from her coat. When she notices you watching, she nods once. "Wine's good for riding. I should head out soon." You ask if she'll return. "Maybe," she says. "Depends what the trail gives me." Her horse snorts, stamping a hoof. She pulls herself into the saddle with fluid ease. "Stay steady," she says to you, not as a farewell, but as advice. Then she rides out, heading toward the horizon, where the wind seems to beckon her forward like a quiet guide. You watch her silhouette shrink, swallowed gradually by the shifting light. The wind stirs, stronger, cooler, fuller. Afternoon rolls toward evening now, its harsh edges softened, replaced by hints of approaching color. The sun's grip loosens. The shadows lengthen. People's steps grow lighter. And you realize you're still here, still standing, still breathing the wind of a world that's older, tougher, and stranger than anything you've lived before. The heat eases its grip on the land as the sun edges lower, sliding quietly toward the horizon. You feel it first as a softening of the light, then as a gentle coolness brushing your skin, then as a shift in the way the shadows stretch long and blue across the ground. The day exhales. The wind, now calmer and surer of itself, moves through the town with a steadiness that feels almost intentional. This is the beginning of the blue hour, the Old West version. At least. No cameras to romanticize it, no screens to filter it, just real light bending through the sky, washing everything in a deepening indigo that makes the wooden porches, the water barrels, and even the dust look almost poetic. You take a few slow steps down the road, savoring the shift. The heat that once pressed down like a stubborn blanket now lifts off your shoulders. The air cools inch by inch. Even the animals seem relieved. Horses shake their manes. Chickens emerge from under porches, and the town dog perks up as though he's been resurrected from a brief but dramatic afternoon nap. A major historical fact slips into your awareness with the ease of evening. Many frontier towns considered dusk the safest, most socially active part of the day. With chores mostly done and temperatures beginning to drop, families gathered outside their homes, neighbors shared news, and travelers approached town limits, hoping for food and shelter. Right on cue, you begin to hear soft voices drifting from porches. A woman rocks in her chair while brushing her daughter's hair. Two ranch hands play a quiet game of horseshoes in the settling dust. Someone laughs gently, the way people do when the world feels briefly forgiving. You breathe it in. The peace, the easing, the sense that the worst parts of the day are now behind you. As you walk toward the well, you notice a new group of people approaching from the south, 3 silhouettes leading 2 pack mules. They move steadily, one step at a time, the dust rising around their feet like smoke. You step aside as they enter town, tired but intact. The sheriff greets them with a nod. Long day? One of them laughs. Long month. Their clothes are dusty, their faces sunburned, but they seem relieved to finally be somewhere with water and walls. They unload supplies, exchanging polite greetings with the townsfolk. No excitement, no fanfare, just the simple recognition of strangers and locals sharing the same weary road. The breeze shifts again, cooling further, carrying with it the faint scent of sage and distant water. The sky deepens into a richer blue. The first early, evening star flickers faintly above the rooftops. You wander past the general store, where the shopkeeper is closing his shutters with deliberate slowness. "Storm didn't knock my roof off," he says, calling that a victory. You agree it does feel like one. A little farther, you spot the boarding house keeper lighting lanterns along the porch steps. Their glow spreads softly across the wood, catching on damp patches still drying from the storm. The warm light blends beautifully with the indigo sky, creating pockets of gold in the quiet blue. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the hour. In some frontier communities, people hung tiny ribbons of cloth on porch posts at dusk. Each color meant something: blue for safe travels, yellow for welcome strangers, red for warnings or illness within the home. Historians still debate how widespread the tradition truly was, but many diary entries mention evening ribbons fluttering in the wind. And just as you're thinking, "Hark about that," you notice a piece of cloth tied to the railing of a nearby cabin. A small blue scrap, dancing lightly in the breeze. Safe travels. The sound of conversation spreads through the street, soft, slow, comfortable. No one's in a rush now. The day has finally loosened its grip. You step toward the edge of town, where the land stretches open and quiet. From here, you can see the sky changing, deep blue shading toward purple, then toward a rising silver as the sun dips lower. A few long clouds glow pink on their edges, catching the last traces of sunlight like floating embers. A pair of riders appear far off to the west, silhouettes dark against the fading light. They move slowly, unhurried, letting their horses pick their way across the uneven ground. By the time they reach the outskirts, the lanterns have been lit across the town, forming a dotted trail of gold. One of the riders tips his hat to you. "Evening." You return the greeting. He glances skyward, then toward the town. "Good place to stop before nightfall." You nod. He and his companion guide their horses toward the stable, their voices low and calm as they dismount. The town absorbs them easily, the way the frontier always makes room for more tired souls. Wind rustles through the grass beyond the fences, whispering a soft, soothing rhythm. Cicadas begin their slow evening drone. A few frogs croak from somewhere near a long-forgotten barrel. You sit on the fence rail and watch the sun slip behind the distant hills, leaving behind a luminous smear of gold and copper. The blue hour deepens. The world grows calmer still. For a moment, everything feels perfectly balanced. The lingering warmth on the boards beneath you, the cool wind brushing your neck, the soft lanterns flickering like tiny stars, the sound of laughter from porches, the quiet promise of an easier night. You close your eyes lightly, breathing in the peace. You've made it through the hottest part of the day. You've outlasted storms, chores, heat, and confusion. You're drifting with the natural rhythm of a frontier evening, now slower, gentler, more patient. The Old West has settled into its calm, and you settle with it. Evening folds itself slowly around the town like a warm quilt laid over tired shoulders. The last hints of gold on the horizon fade into deeper purples, then into a calm, velvety blue. Lanterns glow along porches, windows, and doorways, small flames swaying in the gentle wind, little islands of warm light flickering in the growing dark. You walk through the main street, feeling the air soften even more. The heat has loosened completely. The breeze is cool enough now to tug playfully at your coat. Somewhere behind you, the windmill creaks in slow, lazy circles. Voices rise and fall around the town, blending into a soft, comforting hum, the sound of people who have finally made it through another long day. A dog barks once in the distance, not in alarm, but in that sleepy, "I'm just checking in" tone that dogs use when they want to contribute but don't know how. As you stroll, a major historical fact drifts gently into your awareness. For many frontier communities, nighttime wasn't just rest, it was bonding. People shared stories, played simple games, mended clothes by lamplight, and exchanged news gathered from travelers. Night gatherings were central to maintaining social structure in places where loneliness could creep as easily as dust under a doorframe. Tonight, the town is in the middle of one of those moments. The saloon is lively but mellow. Its earlier chaos settled into music and low laughter. You peek through the doorway. A man plays a fiddle near the corner, drawing out a tune that's soft and lilting, the kind that feels like a story without words. A few couples sway gently on the wooden floor, moving with an ease they didn't have in the blistering afternoon. You step inside for a moment. The air is warmer here, scented with sawdust, tobacco, and something sweet that might be someone's attempt at dessert. The lanterns cast golden circles on the floor, catching motes of dust that float lazily in the beams. The bartender gives you a nod. "Evening," he says. "Quiet night ahead, looks like." You nod back, sliding past a table where two men compete in a very serious game of staring? No, wait dominoes. They barely blink as one places a tile with the gravity of signing a peace treaty. A soft breeze slips through the door as you step back into the street. It carries the scent of stew from a nearby kitchen, the faint echo of a fiddle's final notes, and the laughter of a few children still awake past their bedtime. You follow the sound to a small gathering near the boarding house. Several children are seated on the ground while an older man tells a story, his hands moving with wide, dramatic gestures. "And that's when the jackrabbit looked me dead in the eye," he says, and tried to go, "Steal my boot." The children gasp in delight. One laughs so hard he falls over sideways. You smile as you pass by, and then, because the Old West loves giving you strange details, you spot a mule tied near the post wearing. Is that a piece of ribbon behind its ear? It looks like someone decorated it for the evening. The mule chews its hay with quiet dignity. You decide not to ask questions. A woman sitting nearby notices your curiosity. "We tie ribbons on the animals at dusk sometimes," she explains. Keeps them calm. She leans closer and whispers, "And it looks cute." There's your obscure cultural tidbit. Some frontier families tied ribbons, bits of cloth, or beaded strings onto their animals to keep them calm at night or during storms. Some said it was for luck. Some said it helped identification in the dark. Others admitted it was simply endearing. Historians still debate whether this tradition was practical or purely whimsical. You continue walking. The air feels crisp now, touched by the faint coolness that hints at a chill later tonight. The stars brighten overhead, scattered across the sky like fine grains of quartz. On one porch, two women sit with baskets of mending, needle tips glinting as they patch shirts and hems. They work quickly, talking softly about the day, missing goats, storm puddles, the rider who came with news, and the surprising return of breeze after the heat. Their conversation flows steadily, weaving stories with thread. A young man approaches with a lantern and joins them, asking if they need help carrying water later. They smile, teasing him that he's only offering because he wants a slice of pie cooling in their kitchen. He denies it. Badly. A few houses down, a man tunes his guitar. The gentle plucking fills the air with notes that hover like fireflies. Children sit cross-legged nearby, mesmerized. Adults listen with half-closed eyes. The music threads through the town, delicate as silk. You pause, letting the melody settle into you. It's simple, repetitive, but soothing, perfect for the hour. Farther along the street, the sheriff sits on a bench outside his office, boots propped on a wooden crate. He's scribbling something on a notepad, probably the next impossible list of chores for tomorrow. When he sees you, he tips his hat. Perfect night for rest, he says. After a day like this. You agree. He smiles slightly. Most folks think the West is all dust and danger. Truth is, it's nights like these that keep people going. He looks up at the stars again, thoughtful. You leave him to his quiet. The breeze picks up as you walk toward the edge of town, carrying a chorus of nighttime sounds, soft guitar strings, low conversation, a jingling harness, the distant hoot of an owl. You sit on a fence rail and breathe it all in. The lanterns glow warmly behind you. The prairie stretches out endlessly before you, its grasses moving in the wind like slow waves. Even after everything, the heat, the chores, the storm, the dust, this moment feels gentle, restful, a rare balance. You've survived another long stretch of the Old West, longer, in fact, than many believed you would. You are dust-covered and sleep-heavy, but still here, still in the story, still walking through this quiet stretch of frontier night. Night deepens until it reaches that special frontier quiet, the quiet where the world feels like it has finally exhaled every last bit of daylight. And even the dust settles down for a brief rest. Lanterns glow faintly on porches. The town's laughter and chatter have faded into softer, scattered murmurs. The breeze hums through the grass with a low, steady whisper. This is the hour when everything slows, not dramatically, not suddenly, but like a long sigh easing through wooden boards and over tired shoulders. The deepest blue settles across the sky, turning into a near black, punctured by stars so bright you can almost hear them shimmer. You walk calmly through the main street, feeling your footsteps soften into the dust. Though houses and cabins line both sides of the road, the world feels open, spacious, an entire night sky pressing down in the gentlest, most comforting way. A major historical fact arrives in your mind, as naturally as the cool wind. Frontier nights, especially the hours after most people went to sleep, were often described in diaries as the most honest time of day. Fewer distractions, fewer chores, just the steady hum of nature and the crackling of a fire. People talked more openly, thought more deeply, or simply rested with an awareness of the land around them. You sense that honesty now, in the way the town breathes quietly beneath the stars. You drift toward the edge of town, drawn by a faint glow, a campfire flickering behind a stack of old crates. Someone must have chosen a quiet place to unwind. You step closer, your boots whispering against the dirt. 3 people sit around the fire, 2 ranch hands and the traveling merchant you glimpsed earlier in the day. Their faces glow orange in the firelight, features softened and relaxed. They sit with boots stretched forward, shoulders rounded in comfortable exhaustion. One man pokes absent-mindedly at the embers with a stick. "Pull up a seat," the merchant says, gesturing to a nearby crate. Evening's too quiet to waste it alone. You sit, feeling the warmth of the fire against your legs. It's a perfect temperature, just enough heat to soften the night's chill, without the fierce bite of the afternoon sun. The ranch hand across from you tosses a twig into the flames. "Winds changed twice today. Bet the weather'll shift again tomorrow." "That wind's been talking all day," the other replies. "Trouble is, I never learned its language." The merchant chuckles. Ain't meant to understand wind. You just feel it and decide what to trust. The fire pops softly, sending tiny sparks floating upward until they vanish into the night. You sit in silence with them for a moment, watching the flames dance. The embers glow like living coals, deep red and pulsing softly, as if the fire has its own heartbeat. The merchant glances at you. You from round here? You shake your head. Thought so, he says. Locals have all grown the same squint. You accept this as an observation rather than an insult. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the night. Some frontier travelers place small stones in a circle around their campfires, not just to contain the flames, but because they believed the stones held heat memories that would protect the fire from sudden winds. Historians still debate whether the practice worked or simply gave campers something to do while waiting for their beans to cook. The merchant taps one of the rocks with his boot. Old habit, he says. My pa swore these rocks kept the fire steady. I think he just liked the pattern. The fire crackles again. Sparks swirl upward before drifting away. Behind you, the prairie stretches into darkness. Crickets buzz in gentle waves. Somewhere far off, a single coyote gives a low, almost conversational call. Another responds faintly. The exchange feels less like a threat and more like a polite check-in between neighbors. The ranch hand closest to you lifts his face toward the sky. Stars were sharp tonight, he says. Storm must have scrubbed the air clean. You follow his gaze. The stars are dazzling bright enough to cast the faintest silver sheen across the rooftops. You can see the faint band of the Milky Way stretching overhead like a spilled trail of luminous dust. It's something, ain't it? He says softly. It is. The merchant leans back on his crate. I've camped under skies all across the territories, he says, and they all look different. This one here? This one's calm. The fire shifts, crackling as a log collapses inward. The flames flare briefly, then settle into a steady dance. Shadows ripple across your companions' faces. Their expressions ease further, softening into that particular kind of quiet people reach only when the day's work is done and there's no reason left to hurry. Someone in the distance starts humming a wandering tune, slow and faint, drifting like a lost lullaby across the street. You can't see the source, but the sound blends seamlessly with the crackling fire and the breeze brushing through the grass. The ranch hand closest to you yawns, stretching his arms. Long day, he murmurs. The merchant nods. Long day ahead tomorrow, too. But there's no frustration in their voices, only acceptance. On the frontier, long days are the baseline. Everything else is extra. For a while, none of you speak. You simply exist beside the fire, letting the warmth lull your tired muscles and the night sky settle your thoughts. And in that silence, something unexpected happens. You feel at peace. Not the peace of luxury or comfort, but the peace of stillness, of a night that doesn't demand anything of you, of a sky that keeps its secrets, of a fire that's happy to burn without conversation. Eventually, the ranch hands stand. Gotta turn in, one says. Sun'll be up too soon. The merchant nods at you. Get yourself some rest. Frontier'll still be here tomorrow. The fire burns low as they walk off, leaving you in the soft glow of the remaining embers. You sit a little longer, feeling the night fold gently around you. Above, the stars shimmer. Behind you, lanterns glow. Around you, the breeze hums its small, steady song. You've survived the longest day yet, and the night, gentle, quiet, and honest, holds you like an old friend. You linger by the dying embers until the fire shrinks into a soft red glow, like a heartbeat settling into sleep. The night around you deepens into that fragile, in-between hour, too late for chatter, too early for dawn, the world holding itself in a gentle pause. You rise slowly, brushing dust from your coat, and walk through the quiet street as the frontier town drifts into its lightest, dreamiest slumber. The lanterns on porches dim to faint halos. The wind hushes, as if respecting the vulnerability of sleeping homes. Somewhere, far off, a single horse snorts, adjusting its weight. A few boards creak on the saloon porch, surrendering to the cool night air. This is the hour where even the restless things rest. You walk toward the boarding house, meaning to settle inside, but something shifts in the air, a feeling, a presence, a thread of restlessness woven through the dark. It isn't danger. It isn't fear. It's simply the way the Old West breathes when no one is awake to witness it. A major historical fact surfaces as you move quietly across the packed dirt. Frontier insomnia was incredibly common. Diaries describe people waking, often listening for coyotes, worrying about livestock, tending restless children, or simply lying awake with the weight of silence. Nights were peaceful, yes, but also long, stretching in ways that made sleep uncertain. Tonight, you understand it. You're tired, but not sleepy, worn, but alert, wrapped in a kind of thoughts that don't need solutions mood. You wander. The well stands still, rope dangling, bucket dark inside its shadowed cylinder. The air around it carries the faint mineral scent of deep, cold water. You touch the wooden rim lightly, it's chilled beneath your fingers. Across the street, you notice a dim glow in the barbershop window. Someone is awake. Peeking through, you see the barber sitting in his chair, feet up on a crate, polishing a razor with small, deliberate motions. Not because anyone needs a midnight shave, but because, as he says when he sees you, hands need something to do, or the mind goes wild. He doesn't ask why you're awake. People don't in the Old West. Being awake at odd hours is just part of life. You leave him to his slow, careful work and continue wandering. A faint shuffle catches your attention. Turning the corner, you find the stable hand standing in the doorway of the livery. He yawns broadly and scratches the back of his neck. "Storm unsettled the horses," he murmurs. "Got a few that won't settle. Gotta walk 'em sometimes." From inside, a mare huffs impatiently, stamping once. The stable hand steps back in, speaking to her in the low, soothing voice of someone who's given this speech many times before. You walk on, not wanting to disturb the soft rhythm of his calm. A little farther down the road, something odd catches your eye. A faint, delicate sway on a porch rail. Moving closer, you see a thin, circular charm twigs woven with thread. A few seeds knotted into the frame. You don't recognize it, but someone placed it there intentionally. A woman opens the door with a gentle creak. She sees your curious expression and smiles softly. "Dream ring," she whispers. "Keeps nightmares out. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit for the night." Some frontier families made simple dream charms from whatever they had. Twigs, thread, seeds, or scraps of fabric. Influenced by indigenous traditions, European folk magic, or pure parental desperation, these dream rings were hung near beds or windows to protect sleepers. Historians still debate how widespread or effective they were, but many journals reference them with surprising tenderness. You thank her quietly. She returns inside, shutting the door with a soft wooden click. The street is nearly still now. The sky overhead stretches endlessly, its stars beginning to fade at their edges as the hour inches toward dawn. This time of night feels like walking, inside a held breath. And in that breath, you feel something unexpected. A sense of belonging. Not because you've mastered frontier life, you definitely haven't, but because you've moved through it long enough now to recognize the cadence. The way days rise hard and fall slow, the way storms uproot and quiet rebuilds, the way chores repeat, the way nights soften, the way small communities breathe as one organism, tired, dusty, stubborn, gentle. You sit on a bench near the general store, listening to the quiet. The boards beneath you are cool, the shadows long and patient. You look up at the stars. They glow like embers suspended in the dark, whispering their ancient, indifferent light over the west. For a moment, the entire town seems unreal. Little more than a handful of warm windows and familiar shapes tucked at the edge of an infinite night. Then, a rooster crows. One lone, overconfident rooster who has decided dawn begins now. You close your eyes and exhale. Another rooster responds. A third joins in, confused but enthusiastic. The sky lightens so faintly it's barely noticeable, a shade of grey edging into black. The restless hour is ending. A new day is stretching its limbs. You stand slowly, bones aching in that satisfying "I've done too much" way the frontier teaches quickly. You turn toward the rising sliver of light on the horizon. The eastern horizon glows faintly first as a pale smudge, then as a soft wash of silver blue that spreads slowly across the edge of the world. The The stars dim one by one, blinking out like lanterns politely excusing themselves. The sky lifts in colour, and the frontier town begins its groggy stretch into another day. A rooster crows again, louder this time, as if it's auditioning to be head rooster. Another joins in, then several more. You sincerely regret every feathered creature in a 3-mile radius. The town yawns itself awake. Doors creak open, shadows shift beneath windows. A pot clinks as someone sets water to boil. The faint smell of coffee drifts like a soft invitation through the cool morning air. You rub your eyes and breathe deeply. The world feels fresh, cleaned by storm, cooled by night, and poised for another long day. Somehow, despite the fatigue tugging at your shoulders, the new light feels almost hopeful. A major historical fact steps gently into your awareness. For many frontier settlers, dawn was both a relief and a warning. It meant visibility, safety, and renewed energy, but also chores, heat, and the looming weight of another full day. Morning was the bridge between survival and effort. You feel that bridge now beneath your feet. You walk toward the well, where a small line has already formed. People hold buckets and jugs with the quiet determination of routine. The stable hand yawns so wide, you fear he'll dislocate something. A boy beside you wipes his nose with his sleeve and says, "Goats got out again." You offer condolences. He shrugs. They were already planning it. The bucket drops into the well with a hollow splash. The rope creaks, water sloshing as someone hauls it back up, droplets scattering in the cool air. The sheriff steps outside his office, stretching his back with an audible crack. He glances up at the brightening sky. "We got a couple small matters to deal with today," he calls out, which is his way of saying, "The universe has inconvenienced us again." People gather loosely around him, half listening, half sleepwalking. "Storm knocked some debris into the west trail," he says. "Rancher Miller's fence needs reposting, and someone's mule wandered into the Johnson shed." "That mule does what it wants," someone mutters. The sheriff sighs. "I'm aware." The crowd disperses with mild grumbling, but the kind of grumbling that means they'll still do the work. Frontier towns run on two energies, exhaustion and obligation. You take a slow walk down the sunlit road. The morning light stretches across the wooden porches, turning damp boards into strips of glowing amber. Dust rises beneath passing boots, swirling lazily in the fresh breeze. Chickens peck along the edges of the street, looking suspiciously energized for creatures that slept in trees. You glance toward the corral. Several ranchers are already fixing fences, moving with that early morning stiffness shared by anyone who survived too many chores. The escaped mule stands nearby, chewing hay with zero guilt. One rancher sees you and waves. "We're taking volunteers," he says cheerfully. You wave back and keep walking. As you pass the general store, the shopkeeper is arranging vegetables on a crate, wiping each one dramatically as though he's polishing jewels. When he notices you, he nods. "Morning," he says. "Wind's calmer today. Good sign." You comment that breezes have been unpredictable lately. He shrugs. "Everything's unpredictable lately." Then he leans closer and adds, "Had a dream last night the sky was filled with buffalo wings." Literal wings. Don't trust dreams. You decide not to. Here's your obscure cultural tidbit. Frontier communities sometimes interpreted dreams as practical warnings, storms, accidents, lost livestock, but equally often, they ignored dreams entirely, blaming them on bad stew or overworked minds. Historians still debate whether dreams influenced frontier decisions or merely entertained them. You continue toward the western edge of town, feeling the sun begin to warm the road beneath your boots. The breeze lifts your hair slightly. Birds flutter from fence posts to rooftops. A young woman carrying a pail walks beside you for a moment. "You doing all right?" she asks. You nod. She smiles gently. "Most folks don't last this long their first time out here." You feel oddly proud of that. Children dart past you, chasing each other with sticks that are clearly meant to be imaginary rifles. A coyote trots lazily along the distant ridge, pausing to look at the town, as if debating whether to come closer. It ultimately decides against drama and wanders off. Farther along, a pair of riders from yesterday prepare their horses. One adjusts his saddle, tightening the strap with a practiced tug. The other wipes dust from his boots. When they see you, they offer small nods of recognition. "Gonna be warm," one of them says. You ask if they'll travel far. Far enough, he replies. Trail's quiet this morning. The other adds, quiet's good, means the land's listening. You don't entirely know what that means, but you let it settle in your mind anyway. You turn back toward town. The sun climbs a little higher. The air brightens. A few clouds drift lazily overhead, thin and harmless. The sheriff stands near the porch of the jailhouse now, sipping a cup of coffee with the reverence of a man drinking from a holy artifact. He sighs as someone approaches with a question about horseshoes. You smile as you walk. You've survived storms, heat, chores, and the countless small indignities of frontier life. You've walked through dust and dawn and restless nights. You've watched the West breathe, shift, and sigh around you. And now your journey is nearing its last stretch. The town hums with softened energy. The day unfolds with familiar rhythm, and you feel that quiet awareness building in your chest. You've truly lived a day and night in the Old West. All that remains is the closing chapter, the final reflections, the gentle release, the soft fade out into rest. The sun climbs a little higher, brushing the tops of buildings with pale gold. The last of the morning coolness lingers in shaded corners, reluctant to leave, but you can already feel warmth gathering on the road, quiet, patient, inevitable. The breeze stirs gently, carrying hints of sage, dust, and the distant openness of the plains. You take a slow walk along the main street, recognizing the subtle tiredness in everything. The settling boards, the sagging porches, the half-awake greetings from people already on their second chore of the day. The town isn't worn down, it's worn in, like a well-used saddle, shaped by the weight of storms, sun, footsteps, and stories. As you pass the saloon, a sleepy bartender sweeps the porch with slow strokes. He lifts his hand in greeting, the motion soft, almost lazy. You made it, he says, not as a question, more like a quiet acknowledgement of endurance. You nod, feeling the truth of it. At the well, a woman fills her bucket and glances at you with a smile that's both tired and warm. Storm didn't break us, she says. Heat didn't either. And neither did yesterday's chores. You laugh softly. The frontier has a way of turning small victories into earned wisdom. A major historical fact drifts gently into your thoughts. Most frontier settlements survived not because of heroic gunfights or dramatic legends, but because of simple, stubborn routine, hauling water, mending roofs, checking fences, and rising every morning ready to try again. The West was built on persistence. You feel that persistence echoing in your bones. Near the corral, someone repairs a hinge. A horse flicks its ears at you. A rancher gently scolds a goat who is absolutely planning future crimes. The town dog trots past with a stick twice his size, proud of his morning achievement. Life here continues messy, dusty, hard-working, and full of weary affection. As you walk toward the western road, the sheriff steps beside you, sipping from a tin cup. Folks will be talking about yesterday's storm for weeks, he says, and about how it passed, and we passed with it. He pauses, then adds, funny thing about this place every day, feels impossible until it's behind you. You agree. This world is harsh and beautiful, unforgiving and gentle. A place that demands everything but gives something rare in return. Clarity. Simplicity. Presence. You pause near the fence line where your long day began. The dust is still there, soft beneath your boots, carrying the faint imprint of yesterday's footprints, yours among them. You take one last long look at the town. The crooked signs, the drying laundry, the tireless windmill, the shimmering road, the lanterns now dark in daylight, the familiar quiet woven into every board and window. You've made it to the end of a full frontier cycle. Heat, storm, quiet, dawn, chores, and calm again. It wasn't heroic, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't the stuff of legends, but it was real. And you survived it, longer than anyone said you would, longer than you thought you might. You take a final breath of frontier air, the coolness fading, the warmth rising, the dust lifting. Then you turn slowly toward the open land, the horizon stretching wide and calm. Your Old West journey reaches its final step. And now, we rest. Settle your shoulders. Loosen your breath. Let the dust of the Old West drift softly off you, like sand slipping from your hands after a long, sun-worn day. The town grows distant now, shrinking into gentle memory. The warm lanterns, the creaking porches, the soft footsteps in dusty streets. All of it eases into a hush, a long exhale that settles warmly in the quiet space behind your eyelids. Imagine the breeze again, the cool evening wind that brushed past you as the blue hour deepened. Let that same softness move through you now, slow and steady, cooling the last places in your mind that feel too warm. Each breath a breeze. Each exhale a release. The frontier sky stretches overhead, vast, calm, ancient. Stars shimmer at their own unhurried pace, blinking you gently towards stillness. Their light is soft, not bright, like faraway lanterns left out just for you. Feel the ground beneath you grow quiet and steady, like the wooden porch boards cooling long after sunset. There is nothing left to fix, no chores to complete, no storms to endure. Not now. Everything slows, everything softens, everything becomes simple again. Let your thoughts drift like smoke from a dying ember, rising, thinning, fading. Let your heartbeat find its own steady rhythm, as patient as the horses settling into their stalls. Let your muscles loosen the way the frontier wind loosens the dust from the road. You've traveled far, you've worked hard, you've survived a full day and night in the Old West. Now the journey fades gently into quiet, into softness, into sleep. Let the West fall away, let the calm rise. Let yourself rest,